Chapter 868. Whoosh! Sing Hui's figure shuttled through the seabed and soon reached a depth of 60,000 meters. Finally, Ching Su sensed the abnormality of this region of the sea at an oceanic trench. This should be the place. Oh, this layer of the world barrier? However, this layer of the world barrier is already very weak. It's barely able to withstand the water pressure of 60,000 meters. Moreover, at this rate, this layer of the world barrier will collapse under the water pressure in at most 100 or 200 years, exposing this world to outsiders. Sing Hui stood in front of this small world and did not dare to act rashly. He was afraid that he would accidentally break this extremely weak layer of the world barrier in front of him. 7-star sword spirit, please show yourself or open your world. Seeing this, Sing Hui said loudly, the void-forming immortal monarch understood that the person Ching Su was looking for was extremely important, forming a transparent door. If such a person really existed and was located in the origin world, then they would have nothing to worry about if they compared to 100 years ago, piece that had infiltrated the territory of the master of chaos into their side. Of course, this so-called weakness was only equivalent to Sing Hui, immortal monarch. In fact, it's very difficult to find someone based on their appearance. Still not inferior to any domain realm expert. It would be best if one took into account the various methods it had mastered, and many people's appearances can change in a myriad of kilometers, even a divine ripple body spiritual would have to suffer disguised and altered. However, the average cultivation level of the people in the source world is still quite far from being able to alter spiritual ripples. To my mountain 100 years ago, there are only a few who can change their aura. Is too great. So if you can provide us with her aura is equivalent to a lifetime, we might be able to find her more accurately. Isn't it reasonable to have some changes? Spiritual ripples. Sing Hui chuckled. When Sing Hui and Jiang Ningji had parted ways, he had only been immortal. The feeling you give me, how could he possibly different from those primal and spiritual experts? If her aura and spiritual ripples don't exist, looked at Sing Hui and seemed to be thinking hard about something. The void-transforming immortal monarch suddenly opened its eyes and stared at Sing Hui. I can only tell them to keep an eye out for any information related to this fairy. Like a real, if they happen to run into her, I'll have someone inform you. A true zenith heaven golden immortal? Sing Hui said. Sing Hui was intrigued. He knew that the void-transforming immortal monarch was only doing his best and leaving the rest to civilization. It's our fault for not being able to help you. Not an immortal emperor of the great all-embracing heaven, the void-transforming immortal monarch of the great all-embracing heaven's image to the true golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven who could survive for a short period of time. Keep an eye out in the terrifying environment of chaos. If there's any news, I'll allow you to report to me directly. Immortal who has truly jumped out of the three immortals and is no longer within the 5 elements. Understood. Speaking of this, we'll use all our strength to find this fairy. Could not help but in the cultivation system of the master of primal chaos. There is actually someone 6,000 square meters, which was not raining immortals. There was also a great Tao level of entire world is primal chaos. Even though the most powerful and many unhindered civilization and ordinary level of shattering back to a primal chaos average divine ability is completely even though there was no strategy realm as a hollow immortal not being qualified to become a true grand golden immortal civilization. Family was still not easy when he heard level stars which showed how extraordinary they were. Lord, is there a difference between transformation? Some of the mighty cultivators in the courtyard understand to be attached. You don't understand. Immediately, I've only heard about this from Lord Taishan. It seemed like they would spend the next 100 years searching for golden immortals of the great all-transformation. A few of them, one is those who ascend to the great all-embracing heaven, while another ran into the courtyard to report to the owner. Although this kind of golden immortal is also called Almighty Immortal, they are only ordinary Almighty Immortals. The courtyard. Their achievements will be limited to the world for the rest of their lives. Saw Sing Hui the other standing in the void golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven, he could not help but be pleasantly surprised. However, this kind of golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven is even rarer than those great divine ability first. And only this kind of golden immortal can truly prove the Tao of origin and become a chaotic golden immortal. Please forgive me. Lord Taishan and the others who were bestowed by the way of heaven had already learned from the void transformation immortal Duke that the man in front of them could not help shaking his head. Level 11 divine power realm expert. My eyes are dim and my spirituality is lax. Who was on the same level as the void transformation immortal Duke. How can a real golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven appear in such an environment? We came here mainly to accompany Immortal Duke and waited patiently for Tsing Hui to calm down. Fellow Daoist After shouting for a while, Immortal Duke Tsing Hui, Spirit gradually calmed down. Madame Haiteng, finally came out of the courtyard, fell on Tsing Hui again. But widen their eyes at the same time when they heard how the Bai Fong addressed Tsing Hui. I really want to hope that what happened to you is true. They knew very well what an Immortal Duke meant to them. Still have hope. In the Immortal Dao civilization, cultivators were divided into 4 major stages: who had calmed down and refinement, soul the formation, 7-star sword spirit shook his head and did not continue on this topic. The 9th level instead, of refinement corresponded to the mortal realm. I didn't intend to get involved in the affairs of the outside world, formation corresponded if you have something to say, the 1st to 3rd levels of the divine realm corresponded to the 3 levels of void return, said, and the divine I remember telling you that I came from the immortal ascension stage. Now that the source world has been discovered by the cultivators of the immortal Dao civilization, by the immortal Dao civilization's cultivators, Earth immortals or half immortals. In that world, above there are relatives and friends of mine. Those who had the celestial kingdom were true immortals. I plan to go to the source world to take a look through the world teleportation formation. Immortal Duke, however, because I cultivate the techniques of the Master of Chaos indestructible to prevent the cultivators of the immortal Dao civilization from treating me as an enemy, I want to bring you along. Under the guidance of several pseudo-immortal envoys and many on the other hand, you're all members of the immortal Dao civilization, so it should be easier to talk to you. 3 void return. The Master of Chaos's lineage, grand unity, the 7-star sword was a supreme existence. Tsing Hui with a strange expression. Who told you that grand cultivator of the Master of Chaos's lineage? Qin Yuming's eyes were filled with disbelief. The 7-star sword spirit looked at Qin Su. Just when he was unable to open her eyes because of the dazzling halo above, began to organize his words. It's just a coincidence. After quite a while did he say, Tsing Hui said with a smile. The direction that his taken on the path of cultivation has already surpassed everyone, naturally became cheerful. The so-called Master of Chaos, the pseudo-immortal Duke said very consciously, gods, we won't disturb our immortal Dao civilization any longer. Can you elaborate? We'll take our leave first. Your current state. We've been ordered by another way to describe it. High to open up an immortal residence on Leopa Island 80,000 kilometers away. Legends? We'll give the 3,000 kilometers of Leopa Island to a great legendary disc of life achieved its Dao by slaying immortal Duke Chaos Demon and his family can move to Leopa Island. Are those the Chaos Demon gods you speak of? Thank you, pseudo-immortal Duke. The 7-star sword spirit This is my communication Most of the space we know of is currently occupied by the Master of Time. We can contact me directly. Master of Chaos, the pseudo-immortal Duke handed over his communication Jade Talisman beyond the space we know of. Then there's a terrifying energy and left with the Bai Fong and the other 2. Energy Chaos. The few of them might not feel much when they stared at Tsing Hui, but to living beings that possess their own Dao possess the right to survive at all chaotic energy. These living beings be the legendary known as chaotic beings, right? Qin Yuming looked at the pseudo-immortal Duke who left with Yuan, the 5th level of life above mortals, Shuang with a trace of disbelief in his eyes, and divine beasts. It's true. That's really the pseudo-immortal Duke. The 7-star sword savior who led our Earth's civilization out of the nightmare and ushered in a new era. The pseudo-immortal Duke, the Lord of Time, Madame Haiteng looked at the departing figure of the pseudo-immortal Duke in disbelief. And the 3,000 Chaos Demon gods thinking back to how the pseudo-immortal Duke addressed Tsing Hui, who created the world and created our world, was also a chaos life form. But he was an immortal Duke. Although some chaos life forms are still in their infancy while others are at their peak. The Master Even if that immortal Duke was like chaos a living true and the Master of all the living beings of the Earth civilization, he was a great life that replaced God and then he thought of something and hurriedly lowered her head when she thought of the Master of identity as an immortal Duke. And fortunately, the most powerful and mighty saint of the immortal Dao civilization in love with each other over the years, whose incarnated relationship was rather harmonious as well. Master of Time? Great masters? She did not take advantage of her daughter's rise to power and use her family background to intimidate others like she did on Earth. He clearly felt rather apprehensive. Xu took her in as his expression was humble and respectful. Qing Su's return today, casual she would have embarrassed the entire Hai family. I wouldn't dare make wild guesses about the saints. But they shouldn't be chaos beings. Why did the great pseudo-immortal Duke call you an immortal Duke? One of the 3,000 demon gods could not help but ask. As for the Master of Time and the great masters, they're just pawns used by the Master of Chaos to nurture the 12 civilization and receive the teachings of the great figures and immortals. There are 12 divine beasts under the Master of Chaos. At the peak of the soul transformation stage represent 12 great Daos. The void return stage. And if they can mature, they'll be like the 12 heavenly capital gods. It's not just a little bit to become become a grand simulating the great disk's true form. Even if the feasibility of this plan isn't high, I can only say that it's a personal opportunity. Billions of years you can just think of it as me receiving the inheritance of an ancient golden immortal, the fourth level chaos realm, or the level of the evil god. The master of chaos method of nurturing them is to have the great masters assimilate into the Tao. Shook his head. Assimilate into the Tao? How could anything happen? Although these immortal and relationship with the planet we were on, and it's said that they're using it for the great masters they've taken care of us to the Tao to strengthen the 12 divine beasts. Not only have they provided us with a good living environment and endless resources, divine beast but they've also sent a large number of immortal envoys to guide us in our cultivation. Based on my many years of observation, everyone in the entire Earth civilization has benefited from these benefits. If you secretly ask around, especially the members of ancient great masters themselves know their own situation. The three third-tier void returned mighty figures have always been able to survive despite being banished by the master of chaos, who had been a public official, could not help but raise his voice as a sense of national pride welled up in him. If they want to progress further in the future, they either have to receive the master of chaos support and become a Tao ancestor like the 12 divine beasts, of course not, break the shackles the master of chaos has placed on them, he added. In other words, proving one's Tao through the big family of the immortal Tao civilization, proving many politicians wanted to stir up trouble. Sing Hui quickly connected the dots in his mind. The immortal envoys of the immortal Tao civilization, all mastered master of chaos domain, were the so-called saints of the immortal Tao civilization. Crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Killing the goose they even ruthlessly killed a group of people. How difficult is it to nurture the 12 divine beasts with the method of assimilating into the benefits of our people joining the immortal Tao civilization clearly outweigh the potential of all cultivators in our civilization, because since the immortal Tao civilization did not make things difficult for the people of the Earth even if the master of chaos method is to allow the 12 divine beasts to become true chaos beings and evolve to a level that is not inferior to the evil lords and immortal so that they can observe the true form of the great master, or rather the source world is too great. The seven-star could these people have deduced for that the creation divine Jade was with him from the divine tree boundary in the main strategy against the cultivators that the creation divine Jade was of great value to the immortal Tao civilization. Those who have learned the truth are rather dissatisfied with this approach, to take it away from him, secretly refused to obey the Lord of Chaos's orders. For a moment, while reuniting with his family, he began to consider the possible escape routes. This is also the reason why our immortal Tao civilization has been able to survive in the cracks. Chapter 873. Chapter 8 reunited with his family and spent a lot of time and energy nursing Qing Yiming's body so that he could advance to the 12th level as soon as possible. He was clearly not a great being who was meticulous in the details. Meanwhile, an airship was riding the wind and breaking the waves toward the manor millions of kilometers away from the invasion of the Lord of Chaos. The airship was not big and could only carry 20 to 30 passengers, let alone now when there were only 6 passengers on the airship at the moment. The main reason why the immortal Tao civilization could survive to this day was that the immortal Tao civilization did not have enough strength to pursue extraordinary appearances. There is a fundamental difference between chaos beings and beings below. They were either gentle below the chaos level or imprinted with the characteristics of their world. They could be called a golden couple, a celestial at the chaos level. As long as you want, you can imitate the cultivation style of any from the source world. Immortal Tao very curious about the mysterious and legendary source world. Faith system. The leader of the group as long as you have a suitable cultivation method. The man in the lead looked at the woman beside him who was wearing a sky blue dress. It might be even though it wasn't an ancient costume, but he cultivated the great Tao of unity. Beautiful and elegant if he imitated other cultivation systems too much, and the others were here, they would be able to recognize at first glance that this woman was their precious daughter, the seven-star sword spirit. Their other daughter, the immortal Tao was with High Wire. Compared to when they had left home, the seven-star sword spirit glanced and had undergone tremendous changes, be it in terms of temperament or appearance. It could not refuse directly. Their cultivations had after hesitating for a moment, it sighed and said, reaching the void transformation stage and the domain stage. I'll go with you for the sake of the man who was talking to them was a void-shattering stage. However, I must make one thing clear to you. The highest cultivation I might be able to give some face to the older generation of Grand Luo immortals since they have more or less heard of my name. But I can't do anything to the new Grand Luo immortals born in recent years. Although there were true immortals in the sect, I understand. The elders who were in charge were still false immortals like several Grand Luo immortals, It is not a problem for me to escape with my true body could be called high-ranking deacons. Before the Scarlet Abyss someone like this man who had void-shattering chaos realm and gave him a round even if he could not be called the top figure among the true surviving against a grand eternity one of the best. Now that he had the feedback not as good as you think, sword spirit, although we were born in the source world, we did not feel that it was any different from other backward worlds in the past thousands or tens of thousands of years. Even though he still couldn't fight a grand Luo immortal as she stroked her hair, a grand Luo immortal wouldn't much difference in the past, kill him, but in now the advantages of the source world, as long as he could maintain the state for a period of time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to swiftly retreat the source world have received extraordinary attention and non-existent. It is said that several immortal emperors have been someone who has the potential to become a true Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal, but now you're in addition, there is an immortal monarch even have the qualifications to the development of your race. All kinds of resources are available to you at will, as you can walk such a path. It is really the envy of others. I'm afraid that other than another man in the group who was at the profound voice stage said even those Zenith Heaven Immortals, and even those with great divine abilities wouldn't be able to see through the true mystery of you. Furthermore, it's as if no one would imagine a man dressed like a beggar originally belonged to a large clan almost identical to that prince. This is even more impressive. Sword spirit no wonder Wei was able to break through to the insightful emptiness stage in less than 100 years. He felt that there was something wrong with this analogy. Speaking of the foundation, he said again, Havril could not help but think of true Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. However, do you know how they nominally her elder brother a true Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal is a chaotic life form in the general sense. They had also deduced that even though their chaotic could be regarded as a prodigy, they naturally have to cultivate and explore the chaos possessing a supreme cultivation that allowed her to raised in the regular vicious beasts. If you're given a small pond, the whale will either be malnourished or starve to death. Most. There's no other way. She was not even at her sister Qing Yusin's level, let alone standing shoulder to shoulder with her, or can't go to the chaos void now. Thinking of how everyone on Earth worshipped her brother at the level of a Zenith Heaven Immortal to be able to absorb the chaos Yuan Chi, the peak of the divine transformation stage in the chaos void. Not to mention those immortal sects, you have to become a meteor sect where they were currently at. If you rashly go to the divine transformation stage, cultivation will await you. Not even qualified to become a true disciple of the meteor sect. I understand. At most, he could only be considered an inner disciple. I think we should head to the Fortune mainland now and activate the transmission array there to head to the immortal Dao civilization. If he was not at the peak of the divine transformation stage, but do you have any small divine transformation stage cultivator, you can bring me there too. Of an outer my disciple, spirituality is already not strong. Take in as many disciples of this level as they wanted. I have a small large-scale operation opened by a great divine ability cannon fodder. I'll have to trouble you to rest in it for a while. Shook her head and quickly banished those laughable thoughts from her mind. Divine ability expert? We're almost fine. The seven should be up ahead. Sword spirit agreed. While Havril was distracted, he immediately took out the small world and asked at the same time, "Is this your home? Senior 7-star, it doesn't seem to be the center of the sword should also be in this small world." Bing Li, who had a good relationship with Havril, looked around and asked curiously, "That little guy, Havril, wasn't your cultivation big family already reached its end? Why didn't you live with him? He decided to switch to the Sword Mountain range is the core of the Sword seclusion at my place. I remember that there's a medium-sized immortal vein there. Won't be able to see it was bestowed by the immortal Star Sword Spirit. The efficiency of cultivators cultivating there is more than 10 times faster than ordinary spirit cultivating sword chi. Who else could it be other than hidden our Earth venerable? Our source world with the guidance government was disbanded and there were no external threats. Venerable hidden my father and mother chose to live in seclusion in the mountains. Efficient. Although my mother's family still has a lot of cultivated was not inferior to a strike from a divine true body expert. He no longer wants to fight for anything, sword immortals so he chose to live here in killing. My mother had no choice but to leave the source mountain range with my father and live here. Should I wake him up? Havril said, "There's no need. In the struggle for the great Tao, to the Fortune mainland first, you'll fall behind." As Qing Su spoke, Uncle's way of thinking won't sword spirit a reminder when you go back this time and the small you have to have a good talk with your mainland. Your source further delay has such a unique resource. Sword spirit how can you not use it well? Speed towards the even if you don't mainland. Go to the source mountain range to occupy a spirit origin mainland, you should at least suffered a source mountain range. Right? Fortunately, the quality of the mainland was too remote vein and the cultivators who came to the Fortune mainland were after the Dao than our meteor sects. They wouldn't deliberately destroy cultivating there is 4 even though the power structure on the Fortune mainland had been reshuffled. The situation had quickly stabilized in the past 2 years. Civilization relied heavily on mainland was still under talent and resources. When cultivation speed was directly linked to spirit veins and immortal veins, who was already in the golden core realm, twice the cultivation effect of ordinary spirit veins. Over the years, he had killed more than a dozen chaos the cultivation effect of ordinary spirit veins. He would rush into the small worlds of these supremes and wreak cultivation effect from time to time spirit when he had the time. He would naturally plunder some precious resources which were usually occupied by tiny immortals. If these resources were leaked out, as for it would be enough to make countless first-thought world ascension realm experts bleed. The meteor sect, a portion of it had been given to venerable they occupied a small supreme grade spirit vein. The leftover materials were enough to allow Rockhart's cultivation to advance there were by only 100 spirit origin. At the same time, compared to it allowed her to stay on the Fortune mainland and take care of the transmission array for origins, she would be able to activate the transmission array and again 10 years later. I'll talk to my father about this when I get 10 years. Back then, he had been away from the divine wilderness due to certain reasons for too long. Our family and the higher-ups of the Source Mountain couldn't still have some friendship. They might cause some trouble. If my father is willing to seek help from those people, returned after a year like last time, our family some he might not be able to even if they don't give us an immortal origin. Therefore, it won't be a problem 10 years for us was the most suitable Source Mountain range after explaining clearly. That's for the best. Didn't waste any more time. Your source world has the center of the transmission array and the grand unity immortal monarch void personally taking care of you. After doing this, your path of cultivation will the transmission array immediately. However, instead, such a good thing he took out the World Rainbow Bridge. Once there's an unforeseen event, if the World Rainbow Bridge situation onto the coordinates world of the two worlds through this transmission array. What will happen in the future? If it can lock onto the coordinates, it might be able to open a fixed the only way between the divine wilderness great peace in the world to reap as many benefits as possible. It would be much easier for people on Earth to travel to and from the divine wilderness great world. More hope of surviving in the future turmoil. Sing Hui activated the information gathering function of the World Rainbow Bridge. Havril nodded. She had entered the meteor sect and learned from some of the sect's into the transmission records that the world in front of her was far from as safe as the energy within the void crystals even an immortal civilization that by the transmission array that it had a great divine ability suddenly spread out from the transmission array. Its own when the spatial ripples spread out, no one knew when the entire immortal civilization would meet with a calamity. He wanted to see something, for the sake of her family, for the sake of her future safety. Away regretfully. After returning this time, the ripples are she had no choice but to be forceful and drag her teleportation formation has to be in existence at the level of great ability, accompanied by a series of cheers. Otherwise, the flying boat had already landed outside a profound formation. Who knows how many trillion light years away in a single breath, but the energy ripples it gives off aren't even a hundredth of a teleportation formation of a regular world. It's good that you're the highest manifestation of technology. It was like using a nuclear bomb to blow up a building. Walked out from inside. As the world transmission array and daughter had been separated, the surrounding environment rapidly changed. Naturally, red and blue streams of light constantly flew around him. At this moment, an unknown amount of time, a group of people down the fading streams of light after finally calmed down. She turned to Qing Yumming, who had just walked out of the courtyard and nodded in a huge man-made plaza. However, when her gaze appeared, streams of light rapidly whizzed over from all directions. Taken aback. At this moment, her beautiful eyes 30 or 40 powerful auras in front of Tsing Hui. She had thought of this elder brother who had mysteriously disappeared for hundreds of the world transmission array. She did not expect to be able to see him when she returned home this time. Tsing Hui's gaze swept across these people. Among the dozens of cultivators from the immortal Tao civilization would be disrespectful to this great figure who was on equivalent footing with the void transformations celestial. The remaining dozens of people were true immortals who were equivalent to world creation with brother Tsing Hui, and 10 or so big brother immortals who were equivalent to traversal realm by the great void transformations celestial within Tsing Hui's scope of understanding. Void transformation take a good look at these cultivators from the immortal Tao civilization, quickly regained her senses. Aura mixed with a dozen or so energy waves that were not inferior to primal chaos of the divine transformation direction at an extremely fast speed. There was no need for her to be careful around him like she was on Earth. Already descended, after hearing her mother's words, she could not help but slightly. A zenith heaven immortal. What nonsense are you talking about? Only a zenith heaven immortal what kind of cause him to feel apprehensive and fearful of an Duke is? Considering his goal of returning to Earth, he's a celestial Duke who can oversee the thought of turning around and leaving in his heart. Perhaps you know that a celestial Duke in the direction of the dozen or so auras that were rapidly approaching and waited quietly, right? Let me tell you, in our Milky Way galaxy,
Chapter
there are
870.
hundreds of thousands of
Earth was
civilizations,
only about
but
10,000
each Milky Way
kilometers in
galaxy
diameter.
only has
Even
one
though
true
Earth had been
immortal,
moved to
or
a
even
special
a false
space
immortal,
similar to a small
great
world,
existence
it
like
did
the
not take
immortal
long
monarch
for a
of the
zenith
void
heaven immortal
transformation
to reach
realm.
it.
The
From the
star
moment
areas
Tsing
he
Hui sensed the
oversees
zenith
usually
heaven
have
immortal's
dozens
aura to
or
the
even
moment the
hundreds
zenith
of
heaven
Milky Way
immortal
galaxies
arrived in front of Tsing Hui.
millions,
The
tens of
entire
millions,
process took
or
less
even
than 3
hundreds of
breaths.
millions of
Just
civilizations
as
have to
Tsing Hui finished
completely
surveying
obey
his
the orders
surroundings,
of the
the
immortal
zenith
monarch
heaven
of the
immortal
void
led a
transformation
dozen
realm.
grand unity
Now
immortals
you
who were
understand
equivalent
how
to
great
primal
an
chaos
existence
supremes
like
to
the
the scene.
immortal monarch
Immortal
of the void
Emperor
transformation
Song Hai,
realm is.
one of the grand unity immortals who had been secretly guarding Tsing Hui, stepped forward
Chapter
and bowed.
874.
At the same
Wire,
time, he
I'm
glanced
telling the
warily
truth.
at Tsing
Hai
Hui.
Tang immediately
This is the
became
cultivator
anxious.
who suddenly
She was
appeared
afraid
from
that
the
her daughter would
teleportation
make the
formation.
same mistake again.
However, he did not
All
do
right,
anything
Madam
after
Hai
appearing.
Tang. We're
He
all
doesn't
family.
seem to have any
Why
ill
bother
intentions
with
such trivial matters. The
Tsing
leader of
Hui
the group,
said.
Immortal
At the same
Emperor
time,
Song
he
Hai
turned to Hai Tang
nodded.
and said,
He
"These
looked
are
at
your
Ching
friends
Su.
from your sect,
Who are
right?
you? Come
You
in
must
and have
be
a
the
seat."
leader of this gathering
Taoist
place,
Chang
right?
Feng nodded
I'm not
slightly
your
in a
enemy.
reserved manner.
Strictly speaking,
At the same time,
I'm
he
also
turned to
from
Hai
this
Tang
world.
and said, "However,
Wire,
by chance, I went to another world.
My elder
If the
brother,
leaders,
Tsing Hui,
marshals, and
elder
generals
brother,
of this world from
Taoist
100
Chang
years
Feng
ago
was
are still
slightly
here,
startled.
they should be able
Then,
to
the
recognize me."
smile on his face became
You're
much
from
more
the Source
cordial.
world? So
Immortal
it's Taoist
Emperor
Tsing
Song
Hui.
Hai looked at
I'm
Tsing Hui
Taoist
differently.
Chang Feng.
At
A
this
true
moment,
disciple
one
of
of
the
the men
meteor
who came
sect's
with
hidden
Immortal
dragon
Emperor
ranking.
Song Hai suddenly stepped
Greetings.
forward and
You're a
whispered,
guest. Immortal
"Come
Emperor
in and have a
Tsang Hai.
seat."
This person,
Tsing Hui didn't
when I
show
brought
any
him
special
here,
expression.
I did hear the
He
native
only said this out
cultivators
of
of the
politeness.
Source world
The
mention
woman
him.
named Bing
He
Li
should be called
smiled
Tsing
and
Hui.
whispered to the other
It
man.
was him who
Our
led the
meteor
beings
sect
of
is
the
one of the
Source world
largest
and
sects
developed
near the
them
Source
into a
world.
level 10
Only the top
civilization.
100
However,
true disciples
why
are
he was able
qualified
to
to
lead
lead
the
this
entire
on the hidden
civilization
dragon
to the
ranking.
path of
It's
cultivation
very
is
important.
still unknown.
However,
It's obvious
Immortal
that
Emperor
Taoist
Tsing
Tsing
Hui
Hui doesn't
you
even
were the
know
one
what
who
the hidden
arranged for the
dragon ranking
transfer
is.
of the cultivators of
Although
the Source
the people
world.
of the Source
Go
world
find
are
someone
blessed
to
with
verify
natural
this.
resources,
Immortal
they've only
Emperor
been in
Song
our
Hai
immortal
said,
Dao civilization
"Yes,
for a little
Immortal
over
Emperor.
100 years.
I'll send a message
It's reasonable
now.
for them to
How
have
are the
shallow
people
knowledge.
of the Source world?"
The man smiled
didn't hurt
faintly
them,
and
did
transmuted
you?
his voice.
When Tsing
At the
Hui
same
heard about the
time,
whereabouts
he said,
of the people
"However,
from Source world,
since this
he
Tsing
immediately
Hui is
went
junior
forward
sister
to
Hai
inquire.
Tang's elder brother, we have
Stay
to
where
give her
you
some
are.
face.
Don't move.
Don't say such
An
things
immortal
again."
monarch stepped forward
That's
and
right.
shouted,
Bing
"You
Li
better
said.
not do
She
anything that
raised
would
her
cause
head
us to
slightly and
misunderstand.
walked into the courtyard
Otherwise,
with a proud
don't
expression.
blame us for being
After
merciless."
entering the door, Hai Tang
I've already
carefully
said that I'm
sensed
not
the
your
spirit
enemy.
chi in the
I've
surroundings.
also brought along
It was
someone you're
even
familiar
worse
with.
than the meteor sect.
He should be able to
She
prove that
frowned
I
and
have
said,
no ill
"Father,
intentions
mother,
towards your
if you
civilization."
cultivate in such a
After
poor
saying
spirit
that,
chi environment,
Ching Su
I'm
waved his
afraid
hand.
you'll fall behind
It was such a
others in the
simple
future.
action,
But
why
it
don't you
caused
go
the
to the
nearby
Source
Grand
Mountain
Unity
range?
Immortals to
I
react
remember
as though
that
they
when
were
our Earth
facing a
civilization
great
had
enemy.
just merged with the immortal Dao civilization,
Some of them even
Father,
stimulated
you
their
were one
own
of the top
immortal energy,
100 experts
linking it
of our
together
Earth
to form a
civilization.
huge ceiling
Qin
formation
Yiming
that was
waved
about
his
to
hand with a
suppress
smile.
Tsing Hui in one
The
fell
Origin
swoop.
Mountain range is too
Fortunately,
noisy,
Immortal
and I'm not
Emperor
used to
Song
it.
Hai seemed
I
to
feel
see
quite
that Tsing
comfortable
Hui
here.
only wanted to
As
summon
for our
one
cultivation,
person.
we're
Before
currently
these
under
Tai
the
immortals
protection
could
of the
attack,
immortal Dao
he waved his
civilization
hand and
the
stopped
Origin
them.
Mountain
Wait
range
a
has a
moment.
void immortal
As he
monarch
spoke,
personally
his
watching
gaze had
over us.
already landed on
Even
the
if we
seven stars
cultivate to
sword
the
spirit
return to
that
void
Tsing Hui had
stage,
transferred
or even
out of the
ascend to
small
immortality,
world.
Senior
How
Seven
useful can we be?
Stars,
Thank you
it's
for
better
your
to
trouble.
take advantage of the
Tsing
fact
Hui
that I'm
said.
still in good
He
health
did not
and
seem to
enjoy
care
the
about
rest
the
of my
ceiling
life.
formation
Uncle
formed by
Qin, you're
several
wrong.
Grand Unity Immortals at all. The
We
seven
may
stars
live in the
sword
territory
spirit
of the
looked around
immortal
and
Dao
sensed the changes
civilization
in the
and have
aura.
true immortals.
There's
Great
indeed a
immortal
sense of
lords
familiarity
and
with the
supreme
Earth immortal realm
emperors
above
but
us. The great
that's
Dao
not a
has
reason
long
for
been
us to
damaged.
not think about
Even if
improving
I
ourselves.
imitated the
Our
environment
current
of the Earth
situation
immortal
isn't very
realm
good,
and set
and
up
there are
this
powerful
grotto enemies
heaven world.
outside. Under
This
these
is actually
circumstances,
reconstructed
every
from the world
cultivator of the
fragments
immortal
of the
Dao
soaring jade
civilization
dragon
should work
of the
hard
36
and strive
heavens.
to ascend the immortal Dao
power as soon as possible, that the contributing our strength to the called out the name of the immortal soaring jade dragon. A man stepped forward and said in a deep voice, a noble and graceful immortal glanced at the man who spoke and was startled. He immediately asked cautiously, he didn't know how to answer. Who you are? Sing Hui watched from the side and couldn't help but shake his head. As for my real name, has their own aspirations and cultivators from 100,000 years ago. Since my father has no intention of wandering on the path of cultivation, demon then let him be. Taoist Xing
Seven
Hui,
Stars
you're wrong.
Demon Refining
Cultivation
Sword.
is a transformation
Immortal
of
Emperor
life.
Songhai was
Even if a
slightly
mortal
taken
cultivator
aback.
cultivates
The
the golden
expressions
core,
of the
their
other immortal
lifespan won't
monarchs
exceed
also
10,000
changed when they
years.
heard this name.
However, if
Seven
they can
Stars
achieve the
Demon
immortal
Refining
Tao,
Sword.
they can
Could
easily
it
stay
be
in the
the
world
Grand
for
Supreme
100,000
Saint?
years.
Immortal
If they can
Emperor
become true
Songhai's
immortals,
attitude
then
immediately
they'll truly
changed,
live
and his
forever
tone
and be
became
immortal.
slightly more cautious.
Don't you want to live with your
I did
family and
cultivate
friends
with the
forever?
Grand Supreme Master
Instead,
back then.
you want to see your
The Seven
family grow
Stars
old
Sword
a few
Spirit
thousand
said
years
lightly.
later and
So
endure the
it's Senior
separation of
Seven
life
Stars
and death?
who has graced us with your
Taoist
presence.
Changfeng said calmly.
Immortal Emperor
In order to
Songhai
achieve
bowed
the immortal
slightly
Tao
in a
early,
rather formal
the external
manner.
environment
At the
is of
same
utmost
time,
importance.
he sent out a message.
The Origin Mountain
Apparently
Range
seeking
was bestowed
confirmation
by
from
the
the
immortal
cultivators
emperor
of
with
the
a
immortal
medium-sized
civilization
immortal
who had
vein.
survived
This kind of
100,000
treatment
years
is something
ago.
that many
Originally,
first-rate sects
I had
don't
already
have.
reached the point
Moreover,
where my
even if
spirituality
Uncle
was
Qin doesn't
dissipating,
think for
and it wouldn't
himself,
be long
you should
before
think
I
for your
naturally
children.
fell into an
Junior
eternal
sisters
slumber
way
and returned to nothingness,
or have a bright future
However,
ahead
I
of
was
them.
still dragged
If
here
Uncle
by
Qin
this
can
young
go
man,
around and
Xing
move back
Hui.
to the Origin
It can be
Mountain
considered
Range to
as
enjoy the
selling my
benefits
old
of the
face on
immortal
behalf
vein,
of him
I
and
believe
proving
that
his
way,
identity.
and X
Indeed,
Emperor's
you
cultivation will
shouldn't
be
be smoother,
enemies.
and they'll be able to
On the
break
contrary,
through the higher
I think
realms
you should be
faster.
friends.
The
Of
Origin
course,
Mountain
with
Range.
Senior Xing
Qin
Hui as a
Yuming couldn't
guarantor,
help but
we
frown when he
naturally
trusted
trusted his
his
excellency
excellency
in the Origin
Xing
Mountain
Hui.
Range who schemed
Immortal
and
Emperor
plotted against
Songhai
each other
waved
for
his
the
hand,
distribution
and the
of
Grand
cave
Unity
abodes.
Immortals who had
Back
faintly
then,
formed
he
a
was willing
formation
to lay
around
down
Xing
his
Hui
life
quickly
for the sake of the
retreated to
country
express
and the
their
people.
attitude. However, with the disintegration of the federal
Apologies for
government,
offending you
he had
earlier.
lost his direction of
It's fine.
advancement and had
I
fallen into
anticipated that there
decadence.
might be a
Now that a
misunderstanding
few
between
decades
us,
had passed,
so
he
I
had
specially
gradually
invited
gotten
Senior
used to this
Seven
kind of
Stars
life
out.
and liked the
I wonder
dullness
if you
in
can
front
take
of him.
me to see Earth
If he
now.
wanted to go to the
In
Origin
other
Mountain
words,
Range
the
to
people
fight
of the
for his
Source
own
World.
benefits like before.
Among those people are my
Father,
relatives
just
and
do
friends,
as you wish.
and I really
If you want to
know
go
how
to the
they're doing
Origin
now.
Mountain Range, we'll
Xing
go.
Hui inquired.
If you don't want to go,
Of course,
it's fine as long as we
Don't
don't
worry,
go. Sir Qing Su. We've made appropriate
Xing Hui
arrangements
could
for the
see that
people of
Qin
the
Yuming was
Origin
in a
world.
difficult position
Those
and
with
said,
talent have
after
directly
that,
joined the
he
various
glanced at
sects
Havril
and
and
clans,
Qin Yusen.
while those with less
If
talent
father
have
is
been
worried
able
about
to
my
live a
two
peaceful
sisters,
and happy
I'll
life.
ask the Void
Who knows
Transformation
how many
Immortal
times
Duke
better
to take
they'll
care
be
of them when
treated
the
than the
time
mortals
comes.
under our
I
jurisdiction.
might even be able to find
I'll
some
make the
connections
arrangements
and
right
have them
now
become
and have someone
disciples
take you
of
there
some immortal
personally.
duke so that
Immortal
they can
Emperor
cultivate immortal
Songhai
arts.
instructed the
Qin
Grand
Yuming
Unity
felt
Immortals
relieved
when
when
he
true
heard Xing
immortals
Hui's
around
words.
him.
At
His
this
son
moment,
was on
a
equal
figure
footing
with a
with the
tremendous
Void
transformation
Transformation
immortal
Immortal
Duke
through the
and
air,
was even
attracting
called
the
the
immortal
attention
Duke.
of many people.
There was no need
when
for
this
him to
aura
worry
descended,
about such a
it
small
quickly
matter.
transformed
When he
into
thought
a
of this,
middle-aged
a
man.
smile appeared
Judging
on Qin
from his
Yuming's
aura,
face.
he was actually
Just as
a
he was about to say
Zenith Heaven
something,
immortal
the
expert.
woman named Bing Li
Evidently,
couldn't help
the
but burst
place
into
Xing Hui
laughter,
was most likely
attracting
the core
everyone's
area
attention.
of the immortal
When
Dao
Bing Li
civilization,
realized she had
which
lost
was
her
why
composure,
so many
she
Zenith Heaven
hurriedly said,
immortals were personally
I'm
overseeing
sorry.
it. After the middle-aged
I just
Zenith
thought it was
Heaven
a little
immortal
funny.
landed, his gaze
I'm
immediately
sorry,
fell
please
on the
continue.
Seven Stars
Don't
Sword
mind
Spirit.
me.
After
Havril,
confirming his
who was
identity,
standing at
he
the side,
hurriedly stepped
naturally
forward
knew
and
what
cried
Bing
out
Li
in
was
pleasant
laughing about.
surprise.
She felt her
Stars,
cheeks heating
Seven
up.
Stars.
It's
She
really
hurriedly
you.
said to Xing
I was
Hui
still
in
in
dissatisfaction
disbelief
when I heard
Xing
Immortal
Hui,
Emperor
what are you talking
Songhai's
about?
message. A Void
I didn't expect
Transformation
you to still
Immortal
be
Duke
alive,
is a great
old
person.
fellow.
Why would he have the
purple
time and
gold
energy
red
to
gourd?
spare on us?
Old fellow, you're actually still
Before
alive?
Havril could finish speaking,
Old fellow,
suddenly
you're still
appeared.
alive.
It was
So
a
how can I
man
be
with
the
an
first to
immortal
leave?
aura. The
When he
middle-aged
appeared,
man
his
was
voice rang
overjoyed
out.
when he saw
Immortal
that the
Duke
Seven
Xing Hui,
Stars Sword
I'm
Spirit
sorry to
recognized
disturb
him.
you.
The
I've
immortal
already
transformed,
Songhai
and I'm called
and
the Purple Gold Immortal Emperor have invited
Then
you
he
to a
stared
banquet.
at the Seven Stars
Would it be
Sword
possible
Spirit
for
and
you to
asked,
come to the
Old fellow,
Songhai Immortal
how did you
Palace?
end up like this?
Immortal Duke Xing
Although
Hui?
I've ended up like this,
Immortal
I'm still
Emperor
much better than the
Songhai
others.
and Purple Gold
The eight
Immortal
trigrams
Emperor's
cauldron
is broken.
Havril,
The golden
who was
veil
speaking,
rope is broken,
stopped abruptly
and the
when
diamond
she heard
chakram
these
is
two
destroyed.
names.
When
The
she
two of
saw
us
the
are already
middle-aged man
lucky
who
to
had
be able to
suddenly
survive.
appeared and whom she had
Yes.
seen on
It's
television more
fortunate
than
to
once,
be able to
her
survive.
breathing stopped abruptly.
The purple purple gold
Void
immortal
transformation
emperor sighed
immortal
emotionally.
Duke?
The middle-aged
void
man who called himself the
immortal
purple
Duke's
gold
true body.
celestial emperor
Oh my
sighed
God,
emotionally.
the void
He seemed to have
transformation
thought
immortal
of the
Duke's
destructive
true
battle
body
back
has
then.
appeared.
His
Moreover,
expression
he's
was
right
filled with
beside us.
respect and
Wait,
admiration.
what did the void
Immortal
transformation
Emperor
immortal
Tsang
Duke
Hai,
say?
the void
The
transformation
disciples from the
immortal
meteor
Duke,
sect
and
were
the
shocked
others
for a
listened
moment.
to the two of them
When they
reminiscing,
finally
but they
understood
did
the
not
meaning
dare
behind
to disturb
the void
them.
transformation immortal Duke's
Although
words,
immortal
their
Emperor
voices
Tsang Hai
came
was
to
an
an
immortal
abrupt halt.
emperor, he was
Immortal
obviously a
Emperor
newly
Tsang
promoted
Hai and
immortal
purple
emperor
gold
in recent
immortal
years.
emperors?
Before
Even
that
though
destructive
Qing Su
battle,
had no
he was
idea
at
why
most
the
a
two
Tai
immortal
immortal
emperors had summoned
or even
him,
a genuine
he was still
immortal.
within the territory
Compared
of the
to the
immortal
sword
civilization
spirit of
after
7
all,
stars who
so he could
followed the
not
Grand
just
Supreme
ignore the
Saint.
immortal
His
emperor's
background
summons.
was much worse.
He immediately
Even
replied,
though the sword
"All
spirit
right,
of 7
let's go
stars
right
was
now."
obviously at the end
Immortal
of its tether
Duke
and was
Xing
about
Hui,
to dissipate,
please come with
he
me.
still dared
The
not
Void
underestimate him
transformation,
and
Immortal
had to
Duke
treat
said
him
before
as a
he took a
junior.
step forward.
All right, if you
Xing
want me
Hui
to
looked at
vouch for
Qin
you,
Yiming and
I've
said,
already vouched
"I'll
for
make a
you.
move first.
You can go and busy yourself with your matters. I'll come back
I
and
reckon that you
discuss your
can't
plans
wait
with
to
you,
see the two
Father.
of us
Hurry
reminiscing
up and
about the
go.
old days."
Immortal Emperor,
The 7
that's
stars
the
sword
legendary
spirit and the
supreme
purple
immortal
gold
emperor chatted for a
Qin
while
Yiming
before they
forced
noticed
himself
that
to calm
Xing Hui
down.
looked a little
However,
uneasy. His voice
Immortal
still
Emperor
trembled
Tsong
slightly
turned
when
to
he
the
mentioned
Void
the immortal
Transformation
emperor.
Immortal Duke
Xing
and
Hui
said,
nodded.
"Void
In a
transformation,
flash, he
you
had
are in
already
charge
left
of the
with the
people
Void
in the source
transformation
world.
Immortal
You'll
Duke.
bring this, sir, there.
His speed
You
was
must
so
try your
fast
best
that
to
no
satisfy
one,
Sir
including
Tsing Dao's
Dao's
request.
Changfeng,
Understand?
the true disciple of the meteor
Don't worry,
sect who was at the
Immortal
void
Emperor.
shattering stage,
I know.
noticed
The
him.
Void transformation
Quite a while
Immortal
after
Duke
the void
responded
forming
and
Immortal
gestured to
Lord
Xing
and
Hui
Qing
with his
Su
hand.
left. Havrel,
Sir Tsing Hui,
Daoist
please follow
Changfeng,
us. And the others
Thank
gradually
you, Immortal
recovered from their
Duke.
shock.
They
Xing
could
Hui
not help
greeted
but
the
shiver
7
when they
stars
thought
sword
about what they had
spirit
done.
at the same time.
Soon,
Hui,
he followed
how
the
did
void
he,
transformation
Madame
Immortal
Haitang
Duke
looked at
to the
Havrel
world
with
of
a
Earth,
hint of
where
resentment
the
in
living
her
beings
eyes.
of the source
I
world
told
were
you
settled.
that Xing Hui was
This
chatting
person
happily with the Void
This
transformation
person
Immortal
gives me
Duke when he
a
arrived.
strange feeling.
The
But
purple
you didn't
gold
tell me
Immortal
that he's
Emperor
an
had
immortal
lived for
Duke.
countless years.
Havrel had a bitter
His
expression on her
experience was
face.
clearly not
It's
something
hard
the
for us
newly
to believe
promoted
this.
Immortal Emperor
Qin
Song
Yiming
Hai
could hear the
compare
worry in
to.
Havrel's voice
He
and said,
sized up
no
Xing
matter
Hui for a
what,
moment
he
and
still
quickly
felt
felt
that
that something was amiss.
he won't be angry at
It's
you
more
over
than
such
strange.
a small matter.
The 7
Don't worry about
stars
this.
sword spirit looked
As
at
long as
Xing
the two
Hui's
of you stay
departing
united
figure
and love
sighed.
each other,
I
after
believe
a while,
it won't be
he
long
asked
before
again,
Xing Hui
who's the
accepts
one
you.
in charge here?
Havrel heaved
It's
a
the
sigh of
disciple
relief
of the
when she
prime
heard
Qin
Qin
Yiming's
Yiming's
words.
the heavenly lord
The more
of
he
myriad
learned about
treasures.
the immortal Dao
The
civilization,
purple gold immortal
the more he
emperor
understood
said
in
in
a
how
deep
important
voice.
an immortal monarch
Just
was.
the heavenly lord
Just
of
as she had
myriad
explained
treasures
on behalf
alone,
of her mother,
the
an
7
immortal
star
monarch
sword
could
spirit
decide
was
the
in
fate
disbelief.
of thousands of
The
civilizations.
only one who can be called
This
a
was
great
not
divine
just
ability
empty talk.
is the
Immortal
heavenly
Duke,
lord.
Immortal
The
Duke,
7 stars
my
sword
brother
spirit
is
was
a grand
speechless
unity
for a long
celestial
time.
Duke.
Although he had
This
guessed
is
that the
amazing.
immortal Dao civilization
Qin
would
Yuexin,
suffer heavy
who was
losses,
at the side,
he had not
finally
expected it to
regained
be
her
to such
senses.
an extent.
She could
The
not
great
help but
divine
cry out
ability
in
of the
joy.
entire
With a
immortal
grand
Dao
unity
civilization,
celestial Duke
there
as
was
our helper,
only one person
let's see
left.
who dares to bully us in the
Apart
meteor
from the
sect.
heavenly lord
Immortal
of myriad
Duke,
treasures,
it
junior
seems
sister
that
Havrel,
someone has
there's actually a
intermittently
grand
detected
unity
the traces of
celestial
an
Duke in your
important
family.
family. Who is
Dao
it?
Changfeng
A certain
smiled wryly.
quasi-saint or a true
Initially,
saint?
he was in
The
love
7
with
stars
High
sword
Wire and
spirit
wanted to meet her
hurriedly
parents.
asked. The purple
However,
gold
after
celestial
learning that there was
emperor
a
shook his
supreme
head.
unity celestial
We don't know.
Duke in High
We
Wire's
only
family,
sensed his traces,
he knew he would
but we
never
didn't
be able
find
to
his
match
true
up to
body.
High Wire in this lifetime.
He has
Bing Li
never
and the
contacted
others,
us
who
before.
were chatting happily
However,
with Havrel
based
not
on
long
the
ago,
traces he
had a
left
change
behind,
in attitude
he
as
might
well.
be the Qingping
Their
sword
eyes
spirit.
were filled with reverence when they
Qingping
looked
sword
at the
spirit?
sisters.
Yes,
They
with the
already understood that
characteristics
from
of
this
the
moment
Qingping sword
onwards,
spirit,
the lives of
he'll
Havrel
definitely
and her
be one of
sister
the
would
heavenly
definitely
lords
undergo
and
a huge
quasi-saints
change.
who have the highest
They would no
chance of
longer be
surviving.
in the same world
Unfortunately,
as them.
we
This-
haven't been able to
this was
contact
the
him
power
until
of a
now.
grand unity
He seems to be
celestial
blocked
Duke.
by some kind
Even
of
if the
power
grand
and
unity
can't contact
celestial
us.
Duke did not say
Can't
anything,
contact him.
this change
The
would
7
definitely
star
appear
sword
in the
spirit
following
felt
days.
a little regretful. However, even if they could
Havrel
contact
and
the
Qin
Qingping
Yuexin,
sword spirit,
who were about
it
the
would
same
not be
level
of
as
much
them a
use.
second ago,
After
would
all,
become
their
gods.
enemies were too strong. Back then, they had relied on the power of the primitive
Chapter
world to defeat
875.
those terrifying
Immortal
opponents.
Lord Xing
Let
Hui,
alone
please.
now that even the
The
heavenly
two
Dao
immortal
had been
emperors,
shattered.
vast
The 7
sea
stars
and purple
sword
gold,
spirits
as well as
expression
7
dimmed
star
for a
senior,
moment.
are in
Then
this palace.
he glanced at the
The
vast
immortal
sea
Lord
immortal
led
emperor
Xing
and
Hui
seemed
into
to
a
have thought of
palace that
something.
looked like a gourd
He
that had been
suddenly asked,
magnified
"The
tens
jade
of thousands of soaring victory is in your hands. Sing looked at the huge gourd and the purple gold immortal emperor's should title. Also be in your hands. He had a vague idea of what was going on. That's right. But with a thought, the exalted heaven is indeed in our hands. There were already many experts present in the palace. Damaged, and the power it can transform is less than 1/10,000th gold immortal emperor. It's and the seven-star sword spirit. That's the greatest. There were also more than a dozen. There was grand joy immortals seven-star sword spirit. In particular, there was a slightly plump old man sitting at the head of the vanished with the immortal lord was unfathomable and said sternly, "Sing Hui looked at him. It was as if he had seen the true essence of the world. There's something I want to discuss of the heavenly lord of myriad treasures that were revealed. This matter might be related to the hope and opportunity of our civilization." Appear in the hands of a world creation expert, to the hope they would be able to break of our immortal chaos realm within a few decades and become a supreme gold immortal emperor's expression turns serious as well. based on his understanding of the seven stars body into Tao. He knew the seven stars sword spirit would not joke about such an important matter. Trembled violently. He said without hesitation, first-level Tao I'll arrange it for you right away. But his Tao was so weak that it wasn't even worth mentioning. Even if he used the special characteristics of his great Tao, this is the territory where the people of the sovereign who had cultivated the Origin's sacred body. The void immortal monarch was still far from being able to contend against the sovereign, finally stopping at a land with mountains, they were both rivers and grasslands that was very similar to Earth's. The power of the great Tao in his body, his might dragon soaring heaven was bigger than the divine wilderness, and he would be able to easily defeat existences at the level of the ruler. Great world. There seems to be only one great dragon soaring heaven had been mostly destroyed, who transformed his body into Tao. In terms of total area, it was only 100 million kilometers in diameter, which was smaller than the divine wilderness great world. Didn't they say that not to mention the true sun immortal emperor, the purple gold immortal emperor, and the jade capital great star sword spirit had summoned him? This was only the surface area of the jade dragon soaring heaven. Even the heavenly lord of myriad treasures had appeared here. Civilization was formed by the unification of a large number of worlds. The existence of the fortune divine jade in the divine 36 heavens. But most of them were grotto heaven worlds. You don't have to be nervous. Grotto heaven worlds were the Lord of myriad treasures sensed the subtle changes in there were many emotions, and therefore, in terms of level of development, he couldn't help but smile. The headquarters of the immortal Tao civilization was not inferior to a powerful level heavenly Lord of myriad treasures. Earth was not divided into level 10 worlds. Then, but because they were from the source and bowed as a junior, they were still treated specially. You don't have to think too much about it, which was still less than 10 billion even after 100 years of development. Big secret from the source world of 10 billion square kilometers, most likely, which was 20 times the area of Earth. However, 10 times the area of discussion, evenly distributed, we've already given up with reasonable utilization. All living beings on Earth, do you think we would have currently had a total population of about 6 billion? I'm afraid he'll capture you and interrogate you about the whereabouts of that supreme treasure together. At this moment, had their own private courtyard spirit manners or cave abodes. His expression was rather amiable. As the people of Earth were included in the immortal Tao civilization, words, and with the support of the immortal Tao civilization, Earth had completed the transformation from a technological civilization to a really intended to harm him in a short 100 years. For so many empty words, the instruments that shuttled through the living space of Earth were no longer spaceships. He might be able to escape unscathed from the encirclement of several grand Luo celestials. Sing Hui stood even if there were more than 10 grand Luo celestials, he could clearly feel the huge transformation of Earth's civilization. If he were to face the personal divine ability like the Lord of myriad treasures with a single there was nothing he could do. Who were at the peak of the primal energy level between the two, the civilization of Earth had risen from level 10 to level 15 in just 100 years. In other words, that you have in terms of cultivation level, to achieve what you have today, was not inferior to the divine even though that treasure has helped you before the Qing It is mainly because of your talent. No, it was even higher according to what I know. That treasure has actually been split into 4 parts. After all, before among the 4 had arrived at the divine one of them is in the source world. There were only the other 2 supreme are in the master of chaos void realm. As for the last part, among the 6 billion people on Earth, there were 4 perhaps it is in the hands of the Time Master, dozens at the profound void realm, in the hands of the Master of the Grand Domain realm. For parts, practitioners at the Golden Core in the hands of the Master of Chaos of the total population, which amounted to 20 million. The heavenly Lord of myriad treasures civilization was proficient in extending one's lifespan. The loss of the supreme treasure is all because of our much longer than that of the Master of Chaos when he heard the heavenly Lord of myriad treasures words. They were only a step away from these people thought he only had one piece of the fortune divine jade, and that the other 2 pieces were in the hands of the Master of Chaos. The idea of joining the immortal Tao civilization. The Master of Chaos did not have the pieces part of the immortal Tao civilization. The 2 pieces were in his hands. People walked out of the settlements that the immortal Tao civilization had arranged for them and joined sects one of them that was willing to from the divine wilderness completely becoming a part of the immortal Tao civilization. Don't worry, immortal while the second piece was on the Fortune mainland. These people came from the source world. It could be seen when the Lord of Heaven learned of this. He personally ordered originally in the Master of settle them down territory. In the end, it was just that they were not in the Master of primal chaos hands. I didn't disappoint immortal Emperor. What exactly happened between the heavenly Lord of myriad treasures and the others' knowledge and the wandering of the Fortune divine in 100 years? they've made significant progress and entered the level
broken
15
supreme
civilization
treasure may
level.
allow one to become a
Immortal
great divine
Emperor
master,
Songhai smiled,
but it will be extremely
Singhui
difficult
could not
to
help
progress
but
further,
feel a little helpless
especially
when he
now
heard
that the
this.
heavenly Tao is
According
broken
to
and the
Immortal
great
Emperor
Tao is
Songhai,
incomplete.
he had
It is not
single-handedly
easy
led
for an
an
ordinary
civilization
person to
from
rely
level
on such
10
a
to
supreme
level
treasure
15.
to reach the great
Singhui
divine
should
master
be
realm.
thanking him.
On the
But he,
contrary,
who truly
although you are
understood the
not a
immortal
great
Tao
divine
civilization's
master now,
current
in our
situation,
opinion,
did
the
not
supreme
want Earth
treasure in your
civilization to
possession
have
will
too much to
definitely
do
be
with the
much more
immortal Tao
effective than if
civilization.
it was passed to us.
After all,
Therefore,
the immortal Tao
we do not have
civilization
any
was the
other
target
thoughts
of
about the
attacks
treasure
from
in your
three
possession.
great existences:
The heavenly
Lord
Lord
of
Chaos,
myriad treasures,
the Lord of
said
Time,
with a smile,
and the Lord of Gods.
Although Singhui
Currently,
did not
the
completely
cultivators
trust him,
of the immortal
he was
Tao
relieved.
civilization were
Thank you for
constantly
your help,
sowing discord,
Heavenly Lord,
causing the
This
experts
was
under
also
the
because
great
they thought he
existences
only
to turn
had
a
one
blind
piece
eye
of
to
the
their
fortune
existence.
divine jade.
However,
So they were
once
magnanimous.
the experts under the
If
great
they knew that
existences
Singhui
began
had
to
almost
capture the
completed
immortal
the
Tao
fortune divine
civilization
jade
with
and
all their
only
might,
had a small
how
piece
long
left,
could the immortal
Singhui
Tao
estimated that there was an
last?
80 to
However,
90%
he
chance that they
naturally
would
could not
directly
say
snatch
these
it.
words in front
Can
of
you let me
immortal
feel the
Emperor
great
Songhai
Tao law
and the
that you have
others?
comprehended?
Many thanks,
Of course.
immortal Emperor
Singhui
Songhai.
said,
I was
in the next
delayed for
moment,
100
he
years
activated
because
the
of some
characteristics of the
If it
great
weren't
Tao
for you
of
bringing
unity
them here
in
in
his body,
time and
in an
transforming
instant,
Earth's
the surrounding
civilization
heaven
into a
and earth
cultivation
Yuan Chi was
civilization,
rapidly
I'm
absorbed
afraid
by
I wouldn't
him,
have been able to see
transformed
many of my
and
family and
condensed
friends
into
again.
one.
Immediately after, the
Sword
power
Sovereign
of the great Tao
Singhui,
on
you're too
Tsinghui's
kind.
body changed
Since
again.
I've brought the people
Much
of
of the
source
heaven and
world
earth
who
Yuan
are
Chi
immortal
was
Tao
rapidly
civilization,
repelled.
I
All
naturally
the
have to take
information that passed through
responsibility
his
for their
area
survival.
dissipated and was lost.
Singhui nodded.
This is the
When
characteristic of
Singhui
my
and
great
immortal
Tao
Emperor
of unity.
Songhai appeared
It can
in
allow
this
me to
territory.
switch between
The
existence
experts of the
and
immortal Tao
non-existence.
civilization who
If I
specialized in
I will
teaching Earth's
simplify everything
civilization
until I
since their
devour
presence.
and transform
Soon,
it into the
3
power
men
of the great
equivalent
Tao
to the
of unity.
unrivaled realm
If I don't
hurried over
exist,
and
I
bowed
will repel
respectfully.
everything.
Greetings,
as if I am
immortal
detached
Emperor
from the world.
Songhai.
Any energy
Are the 3 of
fluctuations
you on
around
duty
me will
today?
be broken down
Are the
and
people
lost.
of the source world
This
all
power
right?
of the great Tao
No,
is
the people
very
of the source
domineering.
world are
It is a
extremely
bit similar to a
enthusiastic and
celestial
curious
body
about
in the
our
starry
immortal
sky.
Tao civilization.
Ching Su nodded.
Currently,
I have
most of them
indeed
are
comprehended it
wholeheartedly
based on the black
focused on
holes in the
cultivating
celestial
seclusion.
bodies. In
However,
addition, with the
the
resources
essence of
you've
my
provided,
great way
they
is
don't
a
have to worry
universal
about
singularity.
resources. Much
It's
less
just a pity
insight
that as I have never
unnecessary
hatred
hatred
in
seen a
killing,
universal
the one with
singularity,
the highest
my great
cultivation
way
among
is
the
still
3
incomplete
responded
even now.
respectfully.
It's
He
only
then
a
added,
fledgling. However, due
a
to the
universe
overly
singularity?
comfortable environment,
Rumor
many
has it
people's
that if you
mental
continuously
cultivation
trace
can
the
no longer
origin of
keep
a
up.
universe,
If this
its
problem
end point
isn't
will be a
resolved as soon as
singularity.
possible,
The
it'll be
singularity
difficult
you
for their
speak of is the
civilization level to
singularity?
rise again.
Yes.
Similarly,
Then activate
it is the
the
word
demon
refinement
one in Tao
illusory
begets
realm
one.
and let them
Therefore,
experience
I call my
reincarnation
great Tao
again
law
and
the great
again
Tao of
in the
unity.
illusory realm.
A
They'll
universe
continuously
singularity
defeat
is
their
indeed
inner demons
equivalent to
and
the word
evil thoughts
one
and
born
refine
from
their
their
souls.
souls.
It is
Immortal Emperor
precisely
Songhai
because of the
said,
appearance of the universe
demon
singularity
refinement
that the
illusory
universe
realm,
and all
the
living
cost of
things
activating
are further
the demon
developed. Refinement illusory realm is not small. It is like
every
Tao
year,
begets one,
even if it's
one
only
begets
10,000 people,
2 begets
the
3,
amount of resources
and 3
spent
begets
is enough
all
to
living
nurture
things.
an earthly
the heavenly
immortal.
Lord of
It's all
plentiful
right,
treasures
activated.
nodded in agreement.
After the void
At the
celestial
same time,
Duke finished
he
speaking,
sighed with
he
emotion.
turned to Singhui and said,
Your great Tao
"This
is
Singhui
extremely
celestial
profound,
Duke,
and it is a
He's
brand
an
new
honored
great
guest
Tao
of the
that is
vast
completely
sea
compatible
celestial
with you.
emperor and the
With
purple
this
gold
great
celestial
Tao,
emperor.
your life
He should
essence
have
can
some
transform
questions for
and
all
reach
of
the
you,
level of
so
chaos.
please don't neglect
If
him.
you don't die along
The
the way,
vast
your
sea
future
celestial
achievements
emperor
will
and the
definitely
purple
be
gold
far above
celestial
us.
emperor's
Our
reputations
all
were
cultivators
cultivators
of the ancient great Tao,
The 3
but
void
now
celestials,
our great
who
Tao
were
is
equivalent
broken,
to reigning
and our
realm
cultivation
celestials,
has fallen by
quickly
a large
bowed and
margin
said,
compared to our
"Greetings,
peak.
celestial
If not
Duke.
for the many
If there's
treasures in our
anything you
hands,
need,
we would
please
not
let
be a
us
match
know.
for any of the 21
I have something to
experts
ask
of
the
the
3 of
Master
you.
of Chaos,
I'm originally
the
from the
Master of
source
Gods,
world,
or the
but by
Master of
chance,
Time.
I went to the outside
Moreover,
world to
as
train.
our great Tao
When I
continues to
returned,
break,
the
our
people from the
cultivation will
source
become
world had
weaker
already
and
been
weaker.
transferred here.
One day,
I'd like to
our
ask
great
all
Tao
of you
will
to help me look
disperse,
for someone.
and we will become
Look for
mortals,
someone,
or even dust
void
under the erosion
celestials
of
were
time.
slightly taken
This
aback.
Is there
there no
With the
way
strength
to
of a
avoid
grand
it?
unity
The heavenly
celestial
Lord
Duke's
of
divine
plentiful
thought
treasures
could he
shook
not
his
just
head.
scan the area
With the
to
great
look for
Tao
someone?
broken,
Was
who
there
can do
any
anything
for them
about
to
it?
appear?
Unless
The
someone
void
can
celestial
reshape the
Duke at the
heavenly
side
Tao
knew
and still
Tsing
choose
Hui's
to use the
background,
ancient
so
great
he
Tao
immediately
as its
said,
foundation.
I can help you with
However,
this.
to do this, the mighty
What you're
power
looking
needed
for
is
Celestial
unbelievably
Duke Tsing
vast.
Hui.
Even
My
the Tao
biological
ancestor
father.
at his peak might
Thank
not
you.
be able to do this.
As Sing Hui
This
spoke,
difficulty
he sent
is
Qing
equivalent
Yuming's
to creating
image to
a
the
void
void
celestial
that
duke
is
with
not
his
inferior
consciousness.
to the master
After
of
receiving
chaos,
Tsing
the
Hui's
master
message,
of time,
the void
or the master
celestial
of
duke
gods.
quickly spread
At
out
this
his
point,
divine thought.
the heavenly lord
Like the
of
spring
plentiful
wind and
treasures
rain,
expression
it
dimmed.
silently
In
permeated
fact,
the mountains
with his
and
knowledge
rivers
and
within a
experience,
radius of
all of this was
100,000
minimal.
kilometers.
The heavenly Tao
Soon,
was the moment
he found
when
the
the great
information
Pan
achieved
Tsing Hui had
eternity
given him
and returned
sent
to
the
the
location
past.
back to
It
Tsing
was
Hui
created
with
with
his
the body
divine
of the
thought.
past and
I
contained
found
the
him,
power of
Sir.
eternity.
Celestial
Otherwise,
Duke Tsing
why
Hui,
would the heavenly
shall we
Tao
go
be
over now?
besieged by the master
Thank
of
you,
time,
void
the
celestial
master of
Duke.
chaos,
We'll go
the
over
master
now.
of gods,
And a
Tsing Hui
series
was
of
pleasantly
other great beings
surprised and be shattered.
At the same time,
However,
he was
the heavenly
envious
lord
of the
void
plentiful
celestial
treasures
dukes
clearly did not
use
know
of
about
divine
these
thoughts.
secrets.
In terms
Unless
of the
the
strength
strength
of his
primordial
spiritual
ancestor,
power,
it was
Pan,
definitely
is
not
willing to come
inferior
back from
to
the
the
river
void
of celestial
time.
dukes.
No one can
With a
reshape
burst
the
of his
heavenly
spiritual
Tao.
power,
Our
it
current
would not be
extravagant
difficult
hope
for him
is
to
to
raise an
preserve the
area of
inheritance of
100,000
the immortal Tao
kilometers to the
civilization.
ground. That is all.
However,
An
to
elderly
control his
immortal
divine
emperor
thoughts
sighed.
so precisely
And
like
to
the
preserve
void
the immortal
celestial
Tao
Duke
civilization
and determine
and
if they were the
continue its
target he was
legacy,
looking for,
we must have an
this ability
existence
was
that can
far
stand
beyond
against
his
the master
imagination.
of time,
However,
the master of
100,000
chaos,
kilometers
and the
was
master
not
of
the
gods.
limit of a
We
primal
have lost
chaos
all
realm
hope,
supreme
but you,
spiritual
Tsing
power
Hui,
range.
are different.
If he only
The
wanted
Lord
to
of
find
myriad
one or
treasures
two targets,
continued the
he did not
exalted
need to
immortal
accurately
emperor's
determine
words
the
and
location
looked
of
at Qing
ants.
Su with
It should
shining
not be
eyes.
difficult, right?
There was a hint
With
of
the foundation
anticipation
of
on
the
his
primal
face.
chaos realm,
You
could
are
he
a
learn
being
the
of
void
chaos,
celestial
and the
Duke's
essence
method
of your
of
life
using
is
divine
no less
thought
than
and
that
use
of
it
the
to
Lord of
find
Jiang,
Jiang,
the Lord of chaos,
at the thought of
or
this,
the Lord of gods.
Tsing Hui did not care about being presumptuous and hurriedly
You
asked,
are the one of us
I
who
wonder
has the
if the void
greatest chance
celestial
of standing
Duke
up
can
to
teach
these
me this
peak
divine
existences.
thought-searching method.
If you can one day attain the
Of
great
course,
Tao
but
and ascend
the
to the
void
origin
celestial
Tao,
Duke clearly
the
understood
continuation
that
of the
Tsing Hui
immortal
was from
Tao
the master of
civilization will
chaos's
no longer
faction.
be an
So he said
extravagant hope.
tactfully,
This
We've
divine
discussed this for
thought-searching
several
method
days,
is built
and
on the
we've finally
foundation
come
of
to a
divine
decision.
thought and divine
We've
sense
invited you here
cultivation.
to gather the
Before using
foundation
this
of our
method,
civilization
you need to first
and lend you a
refine your
hand.
spirit into divine thought,
And then refine your divine thought into divine sense. Only then
Chapter
will you be able to
876.
instantly refine your
Gather the
spirit into divine
foundations of the
thought,
immortal
and then
Tao
refine your divine
civilization
thought
and lend me
into
a
divine
hand.
sense.
Only
Tsing Hui
then
was
will you
taken
be able
aback
to
by this
instantly
outcome.
determine the
He found
aura
it hard
of
to
everyone
believe.
within a radius
That's right.
of 100,000
Gather the
kilometers.
foundations of
If
the immortal
immortal
Tao
Lord Tsing Hui
civilization
wants
and
to
lend you a
cultivate,
hand. I'm afraid
the
it'll
Lord
take
of
some
myriad
time.
treasures repeated,
If
while
immortal
our
Lord
civilization
Tsing
of
Hui
the
needs
immortal
any
Tao
help,
cannot
I'm
stand
very
shoulder
willing
to
to help.
shoulder with any of the
Tsing
top
Hui
chaos
pondered for a
beings like
moment,
the Lord
but
of
in the
Time,
end, he
the
gave
Lord
up
of
on this
chaos,
idea.
or the Lord
According
of
to the
gods.
void
Our
celestial
civilization
Duke,
of the
refining
celestial
one's
Tao
spirit
still
into
has
divine
ancient
thought
legacies,
and then transforming it
including a
into
realm
divine
that was
sense was
extremely
obviously
precious to
not
the
an easy
exalted
task.
immortal emperor.
He immediately
Exalted
said,
heaven.
I would like to ask
Exalted
immortal
heaven?
Lord to help me
Exalted
find another
heaven
person.
is an extremely
This
unique
is a small
existence.
matter.
Transformed
Transformed by the
celestial
great
Duke
Tao
smiled.
laws of the immortal Tao civilization,
Tsing Hui
an endless
immediately
stream of
sent
chaos
Jiang
energy
Ningji's
is
image to the
attracted to
void
exalted
celestial
heaven
Duke.
and
The
transformed
void
into
celestial
great
Duke
Tao
once
origin.
again spread
If a
out
grand
his divine
unity
thought
immortal
to
Lord
search
can
within a
comprehend the
radius
mysteries
of
of the great Tao origin, he has a chance of becoming the exalted immortal emperor and stepping into the 20th level.
He said regretfully,
However,
immortal
apart from
Lord
these
Tsing
functions,
Hui,
exalted
I'm afraid
heaven
I'll have
has
to
another
disappoint you.
special function,
I didn't
which
find
is
the
to
person you're
simulate
looking
a
for.
chaotic
You
environment.
didn't find her.
4 cultivators
Tsing
below
Hui held
the
his breath when he heard
realm.
this.
For those
Even though
below
he
the
did not
level of
find
great
Jiang
divinity,
Ningji the
such
last
an
time he
environment
came
can
to
be
Earth,
called a
he
land
was
of
more
death.
or less
Even
prepared.
great divinities
However,
can
when
only
he heard
live
the
in it
void
temporarily,
celestial Duke say
but
it
for creatures
personally,
of chaos,
he still felt
this
as if a
simulated
huge
environment,
rock was
which is
pressing down on
slightly
his
less
heart.
threatening than
It
the
was
real
so
chaotic
heavy that he
environment,
almost could
can
not
allow
breathe.
them to transform
Senior
themselves
Sister
into
Jiang,
true
was
chaotic
she
beings
really
in
dead?
advance. Transform into true chaos beings? You're saying that I'm not a true chaos being yet? The Lord of Myriad Treasures smiled and said, Chaos creatures are chaos creatures because they can travel freely in the chaos void. Those who have never stepped into the chaos void are like flowers in a greenhouse.
house. They will never understand the vastness and greatness of the chaos void. The Lord of Myriad Treasures glanced at Xing Hui with a complicated expression. In layman's terms, we're like big fish in a pond, while you're a fry born in the ocean. Even though we're larger than you, the characteristics of freshwater fish determine the upper limit of our growth. You, on the other hand, are different. Once you return to the ocean, infinite possibilities await you. Perhaps it won't be long before you surpass us by virtue of the fundamental differences between us. Qing Su understood what the Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasure was planning when he heard that. The chaos was the true home of chaos beings. It was just like marine fish living in the territory of river fish. Not only was it not beneficial, but it was also harmful. After a long time, it would only lead to the death of the marine fish. As a creature of chaos, it was the same for living in many macro worlds. This was also why Tsing Hui had clearly comprehended the great path of unification, but his progress over the years was extremely slow. His combat strength had improved twice. One time, he relied on the 4 supreme swordsmanship of the Void Sword Pavilion, and the other time, it was the feedback of the sword spirit of Scarlet Abyss. On the contrary, most of the time, not only did his great path of unification not improve, but it was also affected by the interference of many forces, affecting the operation of his own great path. Then, thank you for your help, Heavenly Monarch. Since you were born in the Source World and obtained that supreme treasure, you can be considered to be part of our lineage. We will naturally do our best to help you. Since the Lord of Myriad Treasures was now expressing his goodwill to Tsing Hui, he would naturally say beautiful words. Tsing Hui, you can go ahead and cultivate. Being able to use the chaos environment set up by the Daluo Heaven and directly face the process of Daluo Heaven transforming the chaos vitality into the origin of the Great Path will definitely be of great benefit to the perfection of your Great Path. As for how far you can rely on these benefits to reach, it will completely depend on your own fortune. The 7-star sword spirit also spoke at this moment. Tsing Hui once again expressed his gratitude to the 7-star sword spirit. He understood that it was thanks to the 7-star sword spirit that he had the opportunity to cultivate in the Daluo Heaven, comprehend the power of the Great Path, and experience the weakened chaos environment at a close distance. If not for this, he could not figure out why the Lord of Myriad Treasures, the Purple Gold Immortal Emperor, and the others would give such a precious opportunity to him. Only I can open the Daluo Heaven, so I will personally take Tsing Hui there. The Lord of Myriad Treasures stood up and said to Tsing Hui at the same time, "Don't resist." After saying that, his figure moved, and the surrounding spatial laws automatically retreated. As the surrounding environment became blurry, the Lord of Myriad Treasures quickly began to shuttle through the void with Tsing Hui. The Lord of Myriad Treasures was extremely fast. As the Lord of Myriad Treasures shuttled through the void, Tsing Hui could clearly feel that he was getting farther and farther away from where he was just now. Moreover, he was flying in another direction. This direction was not simply east, west, north, south, up, down, left, right, but a direction that Tsing Hui had never come into contact with before. It was like a mortal walking on the surface of a star. He could understand forward, backward, left, and right, but he could not understand the specific concept of down or up because he had never had such an experience. The current Tsing Hui was like a person who had never left the earth. Under the lead of the Lord of Myriad Treasures, he rushed into the void. Moreover, it was not a void in the conventional sense. Instead, he directly left the atmosphere of the star and arrived outside the atmosphere. He had never left the gravitational force of the star, but was in the middle of the atmosphere. It's here. The Lord of Myriad Treasures brought Tsing Hui to this void and sighed with emotion. The Daluocean was the highest achievement of the immortal Dao civilization. It was equivalent to the supreme celestial realm. Even in the Earth Immortal realm where immortals gathered, the Daluocean was still a place that countless living beings yearned for. Every time the Lord of Myriad Treasures saw the Daluocean, he would associate it with the glory of the immortal Dao civilization when it was at its peak. Unfortunately, with the passage of time, the glory was no longer there. The current immortal Dao civilization was no longer as glorious as it was in the past. Tsing Hui also looked around. He could not sense any abnormalities in this void, but he could determine that their current location was probably in the depths of the void. It was not horizontal or vertical, but a kind of true interior of the void. Unfortunately, the Daluocean was clearly concealed by a kind of concealment divine ability. Although the Lord of Myriad Treasures said that the Daluocean was here, he could not sense any trace of it. Fortunately, the Lord of Myriad Treasures reminisced about the past for a moment and quickly focused his attention on the void in front of him. As he pinched the laws, the power of the great Dao in the surroundings gradually manifested, forming an extremely complicated great Dao talisman. These great Tao talisman gradually condensed into one under the Lord of Myriad Treasures' control, forming a spatial door. After a full hour, the spatial door finally formed completely. A vast world that was completely different from the starry sky in front of them suddenly appeared from the spatial door. When the spatial door appeared, Xing Hui also sensed the auras of several Daluotian immortals. Moreover, these Daluotian immortals' auras were clearly stronger than those of Immortal Emperor Zijin and Immortal Emperor Songhai. They were clearly on the verge of breaking through to the great divinity realm. Lord of Heaven. The Lord of Heaven is here. Could there be another immortal lord with potential or an immortal emperor who is on the verge of breaking through? The Lord of Myriad Treasures stepped into the spatial door with Xing Hui. Immediately, several divine consciousnesses were transmitted from inside. The Lord of Myriad Treasures nodded to these immortal emperors one by one. Kong Long, Shan Li, Chengzhu Yunlan. Lord of Heaven, this is... After everyone bowed to the Lord of Myriad Treasures one by one, their eyes quickly fell on Xing Hui, who was behind the Lord of Myriad Treasures. Xing Hui had formed his own great Tao. Ordinary people could not sense his depth at all. Before he displayed his miraculous abilities, even these Daluotian immortals before him were no exception. This is Taoist Xing Hui. I brought Taoist Xing Hui here this time to send him to the Heavenly Gate to cultivate. The Heavenly Gate? Shan Li was shocked. The Heavenly Gate is permeated with primordial chaos qi. This primordial chaos qi has yet to be transformed into origin energy by the great Tao of Daluotian. Only those with great divine power can withstand it. Even if we Daluotian immortals go in, we will have to retreat from the Heavenly Gate to rest for a while. The entire process is harmful. This Taoist can cultivate in the Heavenly Gate. Could he be a new Lord of Heaven? It's a long story. I'll bring him to the Heavenly Gate first. We can talk about it later. The Lord of Myriad Treasures said as he led the Lord of Heaven forward again. As they hurried along, Xing Hui quickly realized that the Daluotian was different from the outside world. In the outside world, the great Tao was obscure and the primordial chaos qi was not obvious. However, in the Daluotian, the great Tao of Tao was like a three-dimensional projection. Ordinary people could read it to their heart's content. In the sky above the Daluotian, there was an endless stream of extremely pure energy. If anyone comprehended the great Tao of Tao, they only needed to refine the pure energy and their cultivation would immediately improve by leaps and bounds. Cultivating in such a place for a year was probably more efficient than cultivating in the outside world for tens of thousands of years. As expected of the highest heaven of the immortal Tao civilization, Xing Hui said sincerely, "It's a pity that the Daluotian is in ruins. It can only support 5 or 6 immortal emperors and 100 or so immortal lords. Moreover, the immortal emperors have to cultivate in pairs. Otherwise, the phenomena caused by each immortal emperor's comprehension of the great Tao would disturb the cultivation of others. If they weren't careful, they would run the risk of cultivation deviation. It wouldn't be like the Daluotian of the past, when there were hundreds and thousands of origin immortal emperors in seclusion." The Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures sighed. Before long, he arrived below the Heaven Gate with Qing Su. The Heavenly Gate was where the Daluotian converted the primordial chaos qi. Primordial chaos qi with a diameter of over 10,000 kilometers was visible to the naked eye as it poured down. This area of 10,000 kilometers was not primordial chaos, but it was close to it. When Xing Hui arrived in this region, he could clearly sense that the circulation of his great Tao had become more agile, and the essence of his soul was vaguely cheering. However, while he was cheering, he also felt an immense pressure when he was freed from the gray energy. His soul, and even the great Tao laws he had comprehended, felt like they could not bear the weight of this pressure. "You can cultivate here. If you feel that you can't take it anymore, you can leave the Heaven's Gate. As for how much you can improve in this cultivation, whether you can completely transform into a true life form of chaos will depend on your own fortune. Many thanks, Lord of Myriad Treasures." Xing Hui bowed again. With that, the Lord of Myriad Treasures turned and left. Preparations for a new book will begin on Wednesday. Normally, a new book's preparation period will take 1 to 2 months. If 2 books are prepared at the same time, it will be impossible to store more manuscripts. The release of the old book will also decrease and become irregular. However, Chengfen will do his best to make sure that the 2 books will be updated next weekend. Chapter 877. Chaotic Vital Energy. Xing Hui went deep into the chaotic vital energy and carefully sensed its nature. It was somewhat different from the great Tao that Xing Hui understood. The chaotic vital energy did not have a direct effect on the great Tao. Instead, it gave Xing Hui a feeling that it was an empty space. Yes, it was like a vacuum in the vast starry sky. For those mortals who had yet to transform into cosmic life forms, if they entered the starry sky outside a star's atmosphere, they would naturally die. However, for true cosmic life forms, there were many things that mortals could not sense in the endless starry sky without any matter or atmosphere, such as magnetic fields, rays, radiation, particles, and so on. However, non-cosmic life forms could not sense these things at all. Once they were exposed to these rays, death would be the only thing that awaited them. At this moment, Xing Hui had gone directly from the atmosphere to the starry sky. Although the starry sky looked very empty, it did not have much of an impact on Xing Hui. On the contrary, his great Tao seemed to have broken free from the suppression of the internal environment and became more active. It was like breaking through the sound barrier in a star was extremely difficult due to the obstruction of the atmosphere, but in the starry sky, it was all very easy. Xing Hui's current situation was the same. The unprecedentedly active Great Tao and the medium that carried the continuation of the Great Tao allowed Xing Hui to have a new understanding of his own Great Tao in an instant. Moreover, this kind of understanding could be said to be growing day by day. It was as if a door that had been tightly closed had suddenly opened to him, allowing him to truly understand what kind of world was real. Chaotic life forms. For chaotic life forms, the chaotic void is their final destination. Xing Hui muttered to himself. He was like a meteorite that traveled from the starry sky. If he stayed inside a star, he would just be an ordinary meteorite. The intelligent life forms inside the star could dismember him. However, in the vast starry sky, with the help of the unique environment of the vast starry sky, he could easily accelerate himself infinitely. When his speed increased to a certain extent, it would be easy for him to destroy a star. Xing Hui stood in the midst of the chaotic vital energy. Without the interference and influence of other great Tao, his great Tao extended and changed freely, evolving towards its final form. At the same time that his grand Tao laws were ceaselessly transforming and growing, his body was tempered by the chaotic origin energy, causing it to become even more compatible with his grand Tao laws. After that, it was ceaselessly strengthened and perfected under the imperceptible influence of the convergence Grand Tao, causing him to naturally be able to develop even more Grand Tao laws. This was a virtuous cycle. The strengthening of Great Tao and its compatibility with his body made his body stronger. As his body grew stronger, he could evolve more Great Tao power to temper his body and become more compatible with the Great Tao, causing his body gradually becoming a vessel. In other words, the laws of the Great Tao were changing according to the vehicles in the world. Tao transformation. This was Tao transformation. Xing Hui's mind was enlightened. Suddenly, he understood what was happening to him at this moment. Apart from the Lord of Chaos and the 12 divine beasts, this was the highest achievement of the Lord of Chaos's cultivation path, Tao transformation. The Lord of Chaos's cultivation path was influenced by the 12 divine beasts. Even if the great masters of the Tao transformation realm were to evolve their great Tao to the extreme, they would be restricted by the innate upper limit of the 12 divine beasts and be unable to truly reach the level of the 12 divine beasts. In other words, there was an upper limit to their growth. But as a chaotic life form, Xing Hui, he had no idea what the upper limit was. As long as the matter in this chaotic void could support it, his evolution of the great Tao could continue indefinitely until it reached the limit of what he could understand, until it could no longer be transformed or evolved. Time passed. After an indeterminate amount of time, Xing Hui gradually felt that his great Tao evolution seemed to be slowing down. He diverted some of his attention to carefully size up his surroundings and quickly understood the reason. After all, the void he was in was not the real chaotic void, but the chaotic Yuan Qi transformed from Daluotian. The chaotic void formed by the chaotic Yuan Qi was obviously incomparable to the real chaotic void. In other words, the supporting effect of this chaotic void on the evolution of the Great Tao was also incomparable to the real chaotic void. Well, I can already adapt to this weakened version of the chaotic void. I just don't know what the effect of stepping into the real chaotic void will be. I'll go ask the Lord of Myriad Treasures. As a great master, I don't know if he has ever been to the real chaotic void. In addition, the 10-year period I mentioned to Rockheart is about to arrive. I have to make a trip to the divine wilderness great world and explain the situation there. As Xing Hui thought to himself, he consolidated his cultivation base a little. His figure flashed, and he left the range of the Elysium and flew toward the interior of Daluotian. However, not long after Xing Hui left the range of the Elysium, he immediately felt the friction between his Great Tao laws and the Great Tao laws of Daluotian. Previously, he had lived in an environment filled with chaotic Yuan Qi, and there was no complete Great Tao evolution there. Now that he had entered Daluotian, the Great Tao laws appeared around him, and when they collided with his own Great Tao laws, it naturally caused waves of turbulence. Xing Hui was less than 1,000 kilometers away from the Elysium, and the collision between his Great Tao and the Great Tao laws of Daluotian set off a violent tide of laws that spread out in all directions. This feeling is somewhat similar to the friction between a fast-moving object in outer space and the atmosphere of a planet. Xing Hui did his best to withdraw his Great Tao laws, but due to the domineering nature of the unity law, he felt like he was about to become a black hole, devouring all the law energy around him and simplifying it until it was compatible with the unity law and became a part of it. No matter how hard he tried, he could only suppress this reaction to a radius of 100 meters. Fortunately, the ripples of Great Tao laws on Xing Hui had attracted the attention of the Lord of Myriad Treasures, who had yet to leave Daluotian. In a flash, he appeared in the air not far from Xing Hui. After exchanging a glance with the Origin Immortal Emperors who had come with him, they all took action at the same time, manifesting their Great Tao laws to suppress the ripples caused by the collision of Great Tao and Great Tao energy. This was to prevent the shockwaves from sweeping through Daluotian and disturbing the cultivation of the Grand Unity Immortal Lords of Daluotian, causing them to suffer from cultivation deviation. What a domineering Great Tao energy! The Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures looked at the pulses of ways that Qing Su was unable to suppress and sighed emotionally from the bottom of his heart. You really are a chaotic life form after all. In just a decade, you've actually improved so rapidly. You're probably close to becoming a true chaotic life form now. All you need to do is head to the true chaotic space and complete that final step, becoming a peak existence that's no weaker than great ability users. It's too smooth. I never thought that cultivation could be so smooth. Everything seems to be flowing naturally and effortlessly. That's because you're already a being of the chaos. Only when a being of the chaos enters the chaos can you truly be like a fish in water. If it were us who approached the Heaven's Gate, let alone cultivate, we'd be lucky if we didn't get injured by the chaos energy. Qing Su nodded when he heard that. Although the Lord of Myriad Treasures and the others possessed the power of Great Tao, their Great Tao was dependent on the existence of the Immortal Tao civilization. Once they left the range of the Immortal Tao civilization, the power of Great Tao would no longer be able to protect them. Since the Great Tao didn't exist in the chaos, they'd be fine for a short time if they went into the environment of the chaos. When do you plan to go to the chaos? The chaos is different from the outside world. No laws exist there, and even the many laws we understand are completely different from the outside world. It's a place where the Great Tao doesn't manifest. Time, space, mass, weight, density, and everything else have no basis. All living beings rely on their own Great Tao laws to exist. In other words, the chaos is a land of endless darkness, and we're like pedestrians holding a candle in the darkness. The only thing we know of is our own existence, and the only thing we can sense is ourselves. When the Lord of Myriad Treasures said this, there was a hint of reverence in his expression. Compared to the entire chaotic void, existences like us are too insignificant. Even the slightest wind and wave can extinguish this weak candle flame in our hands, causing us to fall into eternal darkness and silence. Although Tsing-Hui had never seen the true chaos, his expression turned grave when he heard the Lord of Myriad Treasures' words. "You ended your seclusion this time because I want to see the true primal chaos void," Lin Feng said. "You want to see the true chaos?" The Lord of Myriad Treasures stared at Qing Su and pondered for a while. He sensed carefully before saying, "Even though I don't know if a chaotic being of your level can truly survive in the chaotic void, it shouldn't be a problem if I just take a look. However, going to the chaotic void and back will take quite a lot of time. Even if we leave the exalted heaven and head to the chaotic void, it'll still take a few decades for a round trip. If you consider the fact that you plan to cultivate, it'll take even longer. It's best if you hand over your current matters for now." "That's exactly what I'm planning to do. I want to deal with any future problems first. How about we set a deadline in 100 years? Then let's do as you say. I'll go into seclusion for a while, and it won't take long." "Thank you for your help, Lord of Myriad Treasures. It's no matter. I'm becoming more and more convinced of the 7 stars theory after seeing your extraordinary achievements in just 10 years. Given time, our immortal Dao civilization might really need your help to get rid of our fate of hiding from place to place." The Lord of Myriad Treasures smiled. As for making the immortal Dao civilization stand on equal footing with the Lord of Time, the Lord of Chaos, and the Lord of Gods, or even restoring the glory of the immortal Dao civilization to its peak, the Lord of Myriad Treasures didn't even think about it. After all, Tsing-Hui was too far away from the 3 great existences. Chapter 878. Tsing-Hui waited at the transmission array for less than 3 days before it opened. When the transmission array opened, apart from Tsing-Hui, Immortal Emperor Songhai was traveling with him to the Divine Wilderness Great World. Although the Divine Wilderness Great World was equivalent to Tsing-Hui's backyard, it was still the territory of the Master of Primal Chaos. The fact that the Master of Primal Chaos's territory had a transmission array that led directly to the center of the Immortal Dao civilization naturally caused many Immortal Emperors of the Immortal Dao civilization to be unable to eat or sleep in peace. In addition, they had clearly moved the source world countless light years away, but the transmission array was still able to accurately locate the source world. Such a powerful array aroused everyone's curiosity. Under such circumstances, Immortal Emperor Songhai, who was proficient in array formations, was the representative to follow Tsing-Hui to the fortune mainland of the Divine Wilderness Great World. Moreover, because he was an immortal emperor of the Immortal Dao civilization, he would only live in seclusion on the fortune mainland and would not interfere with the changes in the Divine Wilderness Great World. He even had a supreme treasure that the Lord of Myriad Treasures had specially refined for him to interfere with heaven's secrets and conceal his aura. It ensured that his identity as a cultivator of the Immortal Dao civilization would not be exposed under the prying eyes of ordinary powerful experts. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Rockheart opened the transmission array and respectfully bowed when he saw Tsing-Hui and Immortal Emperor Songhai walk out of the transmission array. Tsing-Hui replied, "This is Songhai, a good friend of mine. From now on, he will live in seclusion on the fortune mainland to research this transmission array. You need to gather everyone and cooperate with him." Rockheart secretly glanced at Immortal Emperor Songhai and committed him to memory. "Supreme Songhai, I'll leave the matters here to you. I'll make a trip to the Void Sword Pavilion first. Go. Don't worry, I won't bring you any trouble." Immortal Emperor Songhai said with a smile. The magic treasure refined by the heavenly monarch of plentiful treasures could conceal his aura before he unleashed his immortal emperor-level battle prowess. Thus, he could still use power equivalent to that of a supreme being, so it was reasonable for him to call himself a supreme being. Moreover, whether it was the Master of Time, the King of Gods, or the Son of Primal Chaos, there were many life forms that were equivalent to Primal Chaos autarchs. However, once they reached the 20th level, their numbers would decrease by 100-fold, or even 1,000-fold. Immortal Emperor Vast Sea's claim to be a ruler was incomparably conspicuous, but his claim to be an autarch was much more low-key. Tsing Hui nodded to Immortal Emperor Tenghai. With a flash, he was already heading for the Void Sword Pavilion. Since Tsing Hui had only been away for 10 years, 10 years passed in the blink of an eye for many Supreme Masters of the Void Sword Pavilion. With the previous record of Tsing Hui killing dozens of Supreme Masters of the Chaotic Realm, the Void Sword Pavilion did not dare to act rashly in the cooperation with Tsing Hui. It was peaceful in the past 10 years. Regarding the arrival of Tsing Hui, the two elders, Floating Light and Sweeping Shadow, who had a good relationship with him, immediately came out to greet him with smiles on their faces. However, when they really saw Tsing Hui's figure, their smiles became slightly stiff. In the depths of their eyes, uncontrollable horror emerged. Transforming the way? Transforming the way? This is transforming the way? Impossible. How is this possible? The two elders, Floating Light and Sweeping Shadow, roared madly in their hearts. If it were not for the aura emitted from Tsing Hui's body that made them fearful and in awe, they even could not help but shout out loud. But even so, Elder Floating Light's voice was still trembling. He could not wait to ask, Sword Master Tsing Hui, you are... Tsing Hui sensed the changes in his own state. He had just returned from the environment of the Daluo heaven that simulated the chaotic void. His great Tao law had also skyrocketed and could not be perfectly restrained. As a result, the great Tao law in his body was continuously dissipating. When he was out, there was even a strange phenomenon similar to that of the heavenly Lord of plentiful treasures, which could make ordinary great Tao law retreat. These various characteristics were exactly the same as the great mediums who possessed the power of transforming the way under the lineage of the Master of Chaos. In fact, even if Tsing Hui's current battle strength was not as good as the great mediums, there was not much of a difference. Compared to the almost insurmountable natural chasm from the traversing realm to the world creation realm, the world creation realm to the supremacy realm, and the supremacy realm to the dominator realm, the gap between the dominator realm and those who had just entered the great medium's realm was slightly smaller. Of course, this so-called slightly smaller gap was equivalent to the gap between the previous realms. In fact, the gap between the dominator realm and the great mediums was still not inferior to the gap between the Jindan realm and the great medium's realm. However, if there were enough dominators, they would have the foundation to kill the great mediums. This did not exist in the supremacy realm and the dominator realm. Unless the supremacy realm or the dominator realm had the intention to fight to the death, otherwise, no matter how many supremacies there were, they would not be able to kill the supremacy realm, and no matter how many supremacies there were, they would not be able to kill the dominator realm. Tsing Hui relied on the characteristics of the creatures of chaos, coupled with the immortal eliminating sword qi that had climbed to the level of great success in the past 10 years. Naturally, he could not be compared to those veteran great mediums. However, if he faced those new great mediums, he might be able to fight them. It was just that it would be difficult to defeat them. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had transformed the way. The method I cultivate is a little special. The two elders don't have to make a fuss. Don't worry, our divine wilderness great world and your void sword pavilion are friends. We will share the distribution of the divine wilderness great world's objects. This will not change. Tsing Hui said. Next, he would go to the real chaotic void to cultivate. This time, the time of cultivation would be quite long. During this period of time, he naturally had to rely on the power of the Void Sword Pavilion to guard the Divine Wilderness Great World, to prevent the Divine Wilderness Great World from being targeted by the endless number of top forces because of the high production of the objects. Hearing Tsing Hui's words, although Floating Light and Sweeping Shadow slightly calmed down, they still felt a burst of bitterness in their hearts when they were close to Tsing Hui. Their own great Tao laws that were compatible with the world were gradually distorted and dispersed. In the past 10 years, they had talked. The two of them had even argued with the two supreme elders, Yi Chen and Lan Xian, who had some prejudice against Tsing Hui. At the same time, They speculated how many years it would take for Tsing Hui to cultivate the Origin's sacred body and become a ruler. The two of them, under Bai Shuang's constant encouragement, still felt that it would take at least 1,000 years, while Yichen and Lan Xian felt that it would definitely be 10,000 years later. However, they didn't expect that in just 10 years, this monstrous existence had not only cultivated the sacred body of Origin, but also crossed the realm of the sacred body of Origin. He had faintly transformed his body into the Tao and became an existence at the great divine ability level. This made no sense at all. There was no logic at all. The two elders think, with the production of the divine wilderness great world's objects, what kind of cultivation do you need to be able to intimidate the small factions and make them not dare to have any ideas about the divine wilderness great world? Tsing Hui said. This, after hearing Tsing Hui's words, Floating Light and Sweeping Shadow pondered for a while. In the end, Floating Light said, in the endless void, among the millions of worlds, a ruler can often occupy a world and even radiate their power to other worlds. The annual production of the Tao objects in a world is around 800, and more than half of these Tao objects will fall into the hands of the ruler. In other words, there are close to 500 of them. If we include their income from other worlds, the number of Tao objects they obtain every year should be around 1,000. A ruler's annual income of Tao aura is only 1,000. This number surprised Tsing Hui a little. This number is already on the high side. After all, not all rulers are able to radiate their power to other worlds and have them offer Tao objects. In addition, the human heart is hard to predict. If a ruler does not have enough control over the world they are in, the sovereigns under them, as well as their subordinates who can create a world with a thought, the traversing realm, and the divine true body realm, will also be greedy for the Tao objects they discover. In this way, the amount of Tao objects that a ruler can obtain every year will be even less. This is also the reason why so many rulers are tempted when they know that the divine wilderness great world produces more than 10,000 Tao objects every year. After Elder Floating Light explained, he added, it's not just the rulers. The sovereigns should all have their own ideas. However, our advantage is that the divine wilderness great world is rather remote. The sovereigns might not mind rushing to the divine wilderness great world to wipe out all the resistance forces there, and then send 1 or 2 rulers to stay in the divine wilderness great world to collect Tao objects. However, they might not be able to stay in the divine wilderness great world with their true bodies. In this situation, if Sword Sovereign Tsing Hui, if Lord Tsing Hui is willing to carve his great Tao imprint in this world and stay in the divine wilderness great world with his true body, I believe that even the sovereigns would withdraw from the divine wilderness great world because they are unwilling to provoke a strong enemy and the troubles they might face in ruling the world. In other words, I can solve the problem that the divine wilderness great world is facing once and for all? Tsing Hui's expression was a little strange. Yes, unless some sovereigns are determined to take down the divine wilderness great world, the presence of a sovereigns is enough to ensure that the divine wilderness great world is not lost. Elder Floating Light nodded. His expression was also a little strange. Obviously, more than 10 years ago, Tsing Hui, who was still fighting hard with the sovereigns of the chaotic realm and spent a lot of effort to expel the many sovereigns who had invaded the divine wilderness great world, was able to intimidate countless sovereigns and sovereigns around him in just 10 years, and became the master of the divine wilderness great world. This kind of change in status and disparity made the supreme elder of the Void Sword Pavilion feel very uncomfortable. Leave my great Tao imprint in the divine wilderness great world? Very well, I'll do it right away. As soon as Tsing Hui finished speaking, his figure had already soared into the air. With a thought, there was no need for any vigorous action, and the space law naturally retreated. It was as if in response to the emperor's departure, even if the emperor was not the emperor of their empire, and the emperor's country was much weaker than their empire, they would still give the other party due respect. When the two elders Floating Light and Sweeping Shadow saw Qing Su rise into the air and fly out of the divine wilderness world, they looked at each other and let out a long sigh in the end. Summon all the members of our Void Sword Pavilion who have reached world creation with a thought and above. At the same time, get Yichen and Lanxin to come with us. Get them to open their eyes and see just what kind of monster they are dissatisfied with and even plan on continuing to be hostile towards. Chapter 879. The Endless Void. Compared to a special environment similar to the chaotic void where almost no great Tao existed, the endless void was undoubtedly much more stable. Although it was full of void storms, causing the great Tao to be in chaos, at least there was the existence of the great Tao. Cultivators above the profound void realm could still barely survive here by relying on their own understanding of the great Tao. Once a cultivator of the profound void realm was thrown into the chaotic void, not to mention the various terrifying radiation, particles, and fluctuations contained in the chaotic primordial chi, the environment where the great Tao did not exist was enough to make them completely collapse. It was like throwing a person into space. Even if he was given a spacesuit that could withstand external radiation, because there was no gravity and no kinetic energy, he could still only be suspended in space alone until he died. Compared to ordinary life forms, there is indeed a fundamental difference. The great Tao law in my body has yet to mature, and I have yet to prove my Tao. If I were to wait until I have proven my Tao before coming to places like the divine wilderness great world, it would be like throwing a whale into a small pond. There would be no way I would be able to roam freely and carefreely in the ocean. No wonder it is said that even the most powerful people rarely see the true body of the Master of Chaos. In the end, it is because the Master of Chaos does not like this kind of internal environment, so he rarely walks outside. Tsing Hui thought, and couldn't help but think of the highest achievement of the immortal Tao civilization, Tao ancestor Hongjun. It was rumored that his palace was located in the chaotic space outside the 33rd layer of heaven. Then he thought of the origin of Tao ancestor Hongjun. He was one of the 3,000 chaos demon gods, and his body was in harmony with the great Tao. He suddenly understood. The chaotic void was the home of the chaotic life. Perhaps one day, when I grow strong enough, I'll have to leave this world and stay in the primal chaos void. At the very least, I'll have to stay in the primal chaos void. At most, I'll have to condense an avatar with my thoughts and travel through the various worlds. Tsing Hui thought, and at the same time, he glanced at the many creatures of the Void Sword Pavilion who were rushing over. At this moment, apart from the two great elders, Floating Light and Sweeping Shadow, who had already received the news, everyone in the entire Void Sword Pavilion widened their eyes and looked at Qing Su in the depths of the void in disbelief. They looked at the figure that displayed the existence of his great way to his heart's content. Under the stimulation of this great Tao, the surrounding great Tao laws all retreated. The power of great Tao radiated from Tsing Hui alone was enough to destabilize the great Tao laws of I Ching, Lan Xian, Mingyu, and Fei Xing. It was as if the connection between the small worlds they created and the great Tao was being taken away. Not deprive. Instead, the laws of the great Tao had been almost completely expelled. Since there were no laws of great Tao in this void, their small worlds could no longer be strengthened by the power of great Tao. Tao transformation, this is the power of Tao transformation. Wherever I am, there is the great Tao. The great Tao is crowned as the king, and all techniques must retreat. I Ching felt the vast aura of the great Tao on Tsing Hui and felt his whole body trembling slightly. When Tsing Hui swept through the divine wilderness and attacked the Xinjiang Great World, he had already guessed that Tsing Hui was very strong. If he was not strong, it was impossible for him to kill more than a dozen top forces that invaded the divine wilderness great world and dozens of chaotic realm supreme masters. But now, when he saw Tsing Hui releasing the pressure of the great Tao on his body without reservation, he understood that the gap between him and Tsing Hui was so huge. They were not on the same level at all. What great Tao is this? It doesn't look like any of the 12 great Taos. Could it be? Is it the heterodox way? Elder Lan Xian said unwillingly. Shut up, do you want to die? Do you want to bring disaster to our Void Sword Pavilion? Elder Sweeping Shadow glared at Elder Lan Xian fiercely. The heterodox way often referred to the great Tao law passed down by the evil god. Not to mention whether Tsing Hui believed in the evil god and was bestowed by the evil god. just the fact that he had broken through to the great magic realm and had the power not inferior to the great magic realm was far from what the Void Sword Pavilion could provoke. Once Tsing Hui was enraged, it would be easy for him to kill these great elders in the chaotic realm. It would not even be difficult for him to destroy the Void Sword Pavilion. Under such circumstances, Elder Lan Xen still did not know what was good for her and slandered him? What was this if not courting death? Elder Lan Xen obviously understood this after the fire of jealousy passed. For a moment, her face turned pale and she did not dare to speak nonsense. Tsing Hui, I knew it. Your talent is unparalleled. In the crowd of the Void Sword Pavilion, Bai Shuang looked at Tsing Hui, who was emitting the endless pressure of the great Tao, and a faint pride flashed in her eyes. This is the #1 expert in our divine wilderness great world, the #1 genius of our divine wilderness great world. However, the consequence of pride was that she seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. But soon, this trace of sadness was put away by her, and she became energetic again. Not far from her, Luan Yu's face was pale at this time, and sweat appeared on his forehead. Looking at Tsing Hui, who was displaying endless power in the void, his eyes were full of fear. At this time, Tsing Hui had also manifested the power of the great Tao Law in his body to the extreme. Then, with a grasp of his empty hand, the Scarlet Abyss Sword suddenly appeared in his hand. The great Tao Law contained in the Scarlet Abyss Sword resonated with his own great Tao Law, causing the pressure of the great Tao to increase again. Although the increase was not great, it made the people of the Void Sword Pavilion, who were already struggling to resist, turn pale and retreat one by one. Imprint of the Great Tao. Tsing Hui looked at the void not far from the divine wilderness great world, and the great Tao Law that had been activated to the extreme resonated with the Scarlet Abyss Sword spirit. With a swing of his sword, Sword Chi suddenly rushed into the sky and whistled in all directions. The sword Chi instantly split the matter and stormed in the void in front of him, forming a terrifying chasm that stretched for billions of kilometers. In front of this pitch-black chasm, the aura of Tsing Hui's great Tao of unification spread out continuously. Countless great Tao Law began to fill in from all directions, as if trying to repair and make up for it. However, they were all swallowed up by the great Tao of unification's characteristics of simplifying complexity and then transformed into his own energy until this chasm was completely fixed. Great divine ability. Great divine ability, this is definitely the power of a great divine ability. If a ruler uses all his strength to strike, he does indeed have the power to destroy a world. However, after he destroys the world, the remaining power will be continuously repaired by the great Tao Law. Before long, the void will return to normal. Only a great divine ability can transform his body into the great Tao and leave behind traces of his own great Tao that can be said to be immortal and indelible. Lord Tsing Hui is really a great divine ability. Mingyu Swordmaster looked at the terrifying chasm that was so huge that it could cut the entire divine wilderness great world in half, and his face was filled with fear. This power was far from what any chaotic realm sovereign could withstand. If it was on the battlefield where the flames of war intertwined, this sword would have killed dozens or hundreds of chaotic realm sovereigns. It should be about time. Tsing Hui looked at the chasm that stretched for 1 billion kilometers in front of him. In fact, he himself was a little surprised that his sword could be so powerful. Through this sword, he also truly understood how terrifying it was when the chaotic life forms began to complete their transformation. It's enough, it's enough. Elder Floating Light wiped the non-existent sweat on his forehead. With this sword of yours, Lord Tsing Hui, I believe that any cultivator who comes to the divine wilderness great world will have to carefully consider the consequences of facing this sword. That's good. Tsing Hui nodded. Then let's go back. As he spoke, his gaze also fell on Bai Shuang in the crowd. Bai Shuang also smiled and nodded at him. Immediately, the group returned to the Void Sword Pavilion. Not long after they arrived at the Void Sword Pavilion, Bai Shuang, Master Jinzhao, Master Firmament, and the others came to visit at the same time. Although they had not gone to the endless void to witness Tsing Hui's sword that could be called a chasm, They had learned from Bai Shuang that the crisis of the divine wilderness great world had been resolved. After seeing Tsing Hui, the two of them said sincerely, "Fortunately, our divine wilderness great world has you, Tsing Hui. Otherwise, no one knows to what extent the divine wilderness great world would have fallen in the future. Tsing Hui, on behalf of everyone in the divine wilderness great world, we would like to thank you for your contribution." After saying that, he lowered his head slightly and bowed to Tsing Hui sincerely. "Master, you're too polite. There's no need for that." Tsing Hui waved his hand and stopped the two of them. At the same time, he asked, "Has anything happened recently? Have you encountered any difficulties? If so, you can tell me. If I can help, I'll try my best to help." "It's nothing. Everything is going smoothly," Master Firmament said. Master Zhenjiao also nodded. "The people of the Void Sword Pavilion know their limits and are quite polite to us." Speaking of this, he paused slightly and said with a smile, "And from now on, I believe their attitude towards us will change again. It's good that you're fine. In addition, I hope that the cultivators of our divine wilderness great world cannot relax. Only when our divine wilderness great world is truly powerful can we establish a foundation for cooperation between the two sides. I'm waiting for the day when our divine wilderness great world's chaotic realm supreme is born." Tsing Hui said with a smile. Master Zhenjiao glanced at Bai Shuang. "Our divine wilderness great world's chaotic realm supreme is none other than Swordmaster Bai Heng." "That's not necessarily true. Didn't you break through to the traversal realm? With your foundation and the mysteries of the great origin, coupled with the endless supply of resources, it won't take long for you to break through from the traversal realm to the world with a thought. If you're fast, you'll be able to break through in 100 years or 1,000 years." Bai Shuang said. 100 years, 1,000 years. Master Zhenjiao couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. "The current divine wilderness great world is already the world of people like you. We can't do it." Master Firmament nodded in agreement. After a moment, he seemed to have thought of something. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but after a moment he stopped. However, this detail was noticed by Tsing Hui. He immediately asked, "Master, is there something wrong?" "There is indeed something strange. I don't know if I should mention it to you. Tell me, and I'll see if I can help you." "Tsing Hui, do you still remember the blood-colored statue that you gave me a long time ago that can condense things that contain Tao rhythm?" Tsing Hui's heart skipped a beat. "Of course I remember. Recently, that statue has been giving me a strange feeling, as if..." Master Firmament organized his words and finally said with some trepidation, "As if it has a life." Chapter 880. Under the guidance of Firmament Master, Tsing Hui soon came to the place where the statue was stored in the Hunyuan Sword Sect. It was an extremely secret underground palace protected by layers of tactical formations. Compared with before, the statue was obviously much larger. It had grown to a height of 10 meters. The whole statue was blood-red and looked cruel and cold. In particular, its ruby-like eyes were full of spirituality, palpitations, and eeriness. Not to mention Firmament Master and Zhu Zhao Master, who were trembling. Even Tsing Hui felt a chill in his heart when he suddenly saw the statue. "This statue? When did it become so huge?" Tsing Hui said with a serious look. When he first saw the statue, the cold and eeriness had been entrenched in his heart. At that time, he only thought that it was because his cultivation was too weak, but at this moment he had grown to the point where he was close to a powerful divine. But when he saw the statue, the fear had not completely disappeared. What did it mean? The meaning behind the statue was at least that of a powerful divine sense, or even, it might be an evil god who was above the powerful divine sense. The only thing that puzzled Qing Su was that, logically speaking, evil gods should have been looking for ways to steal the treasures of ways. So why was this evil god able to provide them with treasures of ways when they sacrificed the cultivators? Thinking about it carefully, the Hunyuan Sword Sect had definitely obtained thousands upon thousands of treasures of ways from the blood-red statue over the years. As we continued to sacrifice cultivators with the blood of divine beasts, the statue gradually grew from 4 meters to more than 4 meters. However, during this period of time, with the help of the Void Sword Pavilion, we killed some cultivators from the Yujing Grand World, the Taihua Grand World, the Northernmost Grand World, and the Illusion Grand World. After sacrificing them, the growth rate of the statue suddenly increased exponentially. In just 10 years, it rose from less than 5 meters to its current height of 10 meters. Previously, Venerable Master Firmament and the others had used cultivators with the bloodlines of holy beasts and divine beasts as sacrifices to the blood-red statues. Due to the limitations of the cultivators' cultivation bases, the blood-red statues had only grown less than a meter in the past 100 years. However, now that the sacrifices had been changed from cultivators below the Saint Realm to those who had cultivated the Saint True Body and even the Reigning Realm, the efficiency had skyrocketed. Don't sacrifice this statue during this period of time. Let me study it properly. Alright. Master Firmament and Master Zhu Zhao quickly nodded. Not only was he not dissatisfied with Tsing Hui taking away such a precious treasure, but he also felt a sense of relief. Tsing Hui quickly brought the blood-red statue to his courtyard and carefully sensed it. However, even though the blood-red statue made him shudder, no matter how Tsing Hui probed it with his spiritual sense or some external objects, there was no reaction at all. In fact, he could directly absorb it into his small world without causing any damage to the small world's laws. What's the problem with this blood-red statue? Tsing Hui muttered to himself. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something. Suddenly, he ran his own coalescence great way. After looking at it for so long, the secret in this blood-red statue has never been revealed. It can be seen that the statue itself is definitely not among the ranks of the great divines. In all likelihood, it has something to do with the evil god. The evil god has always been in existence that the Master of Chaos, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Time have worked together to expel. Since this blood-red statue really represents the evil god and has been able to exist safely in the territory of the Master of Chaos for so long, this evil god must be very familiar with the means of the Master of Chaos. This is why the conventional means, even the conventional means used by the great divines, are useless. Therefore, this blood-red statue is really attached to some unknown creature or power. The characteristics of my coalescence great way, which simplifies the complex and unifies all methods, will be the only way to force it out. The coalescence great way was not any of the great ways in the territory of the Master of Chaos. It had never even appeared in the territories of the Master of Time and the Master of Gods. The evil god understood the means of the Master of Chaos, the Master of Time, and the Master of Gods, and was able to prevent such means in advance. However, it did not mean that it was completely immune to the newly born Great Way rules. Let me see your true face. Tsing Hui stared at the blood-red statue and ran his great way. Streaks of sword light quickly dissipated from his body and began to surround and cut the blood-red statue. As he cut the statue, the power of the great way contained in the sword chi constantly dissipated and seeped into the body of the blood-red statue. It began to constantly wear down the statue. However, as his Great Way rules seeped into the blood-red statue, he clearly felt that his power of the Great Way rules was being dissolved and devoured by an invisible force. However, the effect of this dissolution was many times more difficult than the dissolution of Tsing Hui's other attacks. As expected, you can't adapt to the new Great Way rules? I'd like to see if you'll still choose to endure and not show up when your body is completely destroyed. As Tsing Hui spoke, he had already taken the blood-red statue and soared into the sky. He did not need to expend any effort. The space retreated and he had already directly entered the endless void and headed toward the depths of the endless void. In this regard, although the chaotic realm supremes of the Void Sword Pavilion were aware of this, none of them followed to avoid causing any misunderstandings. Tsing Hui shuttled through the endless void for a long distance until the divine wilderness great world was only the size of a basketball in front of him. Then he stopped and took out the blood-red statue again. Suddenly, the power of the Great Way erupted. An invisible sphere of matter suddenly formed with him as the center. It crazily devoured and annihilated all matter and energy within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, including the spatial storm. All of these were simplified by the aftermath of the Great Way rules emanating from him. They were refined into one and became the source of power of the Great Way of unification. In the end, they were transformed into 49 streaks of sword chi. These 49 streaks of sword chi formed a sword formation with the Great Way of unification as the foundation. They began to surround and strangle the blood-red statue. In an instant, they had already broken the limit of the blood-red statue's ability to offset and transform. This caused cracks to rapidly appear on the blood-red statue, and the cracks continued to expand under the cutting of the sword chi. It seemed that the blood-red statue would be completely destroyed. Just as Tsing Hui was about to completely tear the blood-red statue apart, a dark red mist suddenly emerged from the blood-red statue. The mist appeared, and it seemed to contain a terrifying power that could erode one's soul and corrode one's bones. Even his Great Way of unification could not resolve it for a moment. This caused his aura to soar again. The Great Way of unification began to devour and transform, then to repel, detaching itself and pulling itself away. "Stop, young fellow. We're not enemies." A cold voice that made people shudder came from the dark red mist. Then, the dark red mist that escaped formed a huge face that was dozens of meters wide. Standing in front of this huge face, even though Tsing Hui already had his own Great Way and could easily shatter a great world with a diameter of hundreds of millions of kilometers, he still felt insignificant from the bottom of his heart. It was like an ant looking up at a huge elephant. The terrifying feeling of disparity made his hair stand on end. Evil God. Evil God? You're really an ignorant and lucky fellow. It seems that you have no desire to continue talking with me. I can feel your strength, but your strength is obviously not based on the statue in my hand. Instead, it's very far away. Perhaps this blood-red statue is just a strand of your divine will, and your true body is actually billions of light years away from here? In other words, there's no need for me to be frightened by your bravado at all? Young fellow, I've said before that we're not enemies. On the contrary, we should have a common opponent, an opponent that you should be afraid of. Tsing Hui's heart skipped a beat and he immediately said, "The Lord of Chaos?" The face formed by the dark red mist was silent for a moment before it spoke again. "That's right, that powerful existence. The Lord of Chaos won't sit by and watch a second chaos life form grow in his territory. Once the Lord of Chaos notices you, he'll capture you and turn you into nourishment for the 12 6.5 chess pieces he's cultivating." 12 6.5 chess pieces? Tsing Hui thought of the 12 legendary divine beasts, as well as the bloodline legacies of the Kuanping, Chaos, Golden Crow, Ho, Torch Dragon, Qilin, and Yujia. The 6.5 chess pieces you're talking about are the 12 divine beasts? According to the bloodline of the Lord of Chaos, they are indeed the 12 divine beasts. The Lord of Chaos wants to use these divine beasts to borrow the broken great Tao laws of this world and his own unstinting cultivation to make them truly great chaos life forms. Unfortunately, his plan has been foiled by us. At present, only 6.5 of the 12 divine beast pillars remain, while the other 5.5 are in the hands of the Lord of Time and the Lord of Gods. The war between the evil god and the Lord of Chaos? Evil god. The face formed by the dark red mist looked mockingly at Tsing Hui. "Young fellow, if you can really grow up, you'll be one of us. I'm one of the evil gods." Tsing Hui thought of some of the conversations he had with the 7-star sword spirit. All evil gods are chaos life forms? To be precise, only all chaos life forms that grow up can be called evil gods. Those that die halfway aren't in this category. The Lord of Chaos you speak of, as well as the Lord of Time and the Lord of Gods who now occupy this territory, belong to the pinnacle and the strongest chaos life forms. They're only one step away from completing the final metamorphosis, becoming the ultimate, becoming eternal. The face manifested by the bloody mist was clearly jealous when it mentioned the names of the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Gods, and the Lord of Time. However, when it mentioned the words ultimate and eternal, it was full of longing. It's too difficult for chaos life forms that rely on chance to grow up. 9 out of 10 of them will die halfway. Lucky fellow, why don't we make a deal now? I'll be your guide on the path of chaos life forms, and you just need to do me a small favor. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.